And welcome into the Friday edition of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley here with you on this Friday morning alongside the great David Beauclair from SI.com in place of Joe. Joe continues to be on vacation out in California. Ryan Porth here with you as well on this Friday morning. Gentlemen, how are we doing? What's going on, David? How are you?
Vacation.
Yes.
I don't know this word.
What is that word?
Yes. Yeah, I heard Joe was leaving you high and dry again, so I thought I'd just drop in.
It's been a common theme lately. You've had to come in and rescue me here on the show.
I have. Happy to do it, though.
We appreciate you coming back in here today.
Didn't sleep well last night anyway. I was up, so.
There you go. What better way to spend your next morning than coming in here and talking sports with us?
Exactly.
Ryan Porth, what's going on? How we doing?
Doing great. It's a beautiful Friday in Nashville, Tennessee.
Kind of. It kind of is. A little bit of a monsoon on the way in this morning.
It was.
A little summertime pop-up shower.
It's kind of dry out on the west side of town.
Was it?
Yeah. I heard the rumbling a little while ago, and it got wetter the closer I got to this direction.
Yeah.
But, we're dry out west.
That's the thing about summertime rain showers. It could be raining in a very short area. A little pop-up shower.
Even at 5 a.m.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Never know what's going to happen in this neck of the woods. Over here, we got a lot to get to coming up today here on the show. We start, though, Game 2 of the NBA Finals last night. The Phoenix Suns, they get it done at home again, a 118-108 win. They take a 2-0 series lead in the NBA Finals. Devin Booker, 31 points last night. Mikal Bridges, 27 last night, 8 of 15 from the field, 3 of 9 from 3. And then Chris Paul, 23 points and 8 assists last night. The Bucks started off well defensively, played well, I think exactly how you wanted to play on the road. Giannis ends up with 42 last night on 15 of 22 from the field. But I said this coming into the series, a lot of this is going to boil down to how does Chris Middleton play. And 11 points from Chris Middleton last night, 5 of 16 from the field, including 1 of 6 from three-point. And Drew Holiday, 17 points, 7 of 21 shooting. So 33% from the field last night. David, it's just one of those things where if you got 2 of your 3 star players not shooting the ball well against this Phoenix Suns team in the NBA Finals, it's going to be tough to win. And now they're down 0-2.
Suns are doing it all wrong, though.
Oh, yeah?
They're doing it. I mean, the NBA forever has been a pay your dues league. Yeah. You know, you've got to win a round or two and then get beat, and then go to the next round and get beat. You know, this is a team hasn't even been to the playoffs since 2010. 2 wins away. Now they're going to win this thing. Yeah. That's not how the NBA works.
It's not.
I can't get my mind around this that this is actually going to happen.
It's amazing.
I mean, they're the better team right now without question, but this is not the NBA. This is so far off script for this league. I really it's astonishing to me. I mean, they were good. 50 wins, you can't sneeze at 51 wins, whatever it was. Can't sneeze at that during the regular season, but here you go.
David, we talked about this yesterday, and we'll see what the ratings were like for Game 2, but Game 1, the ratings down in the NBA Finals, and I said heading into this series, I like this matchup because the NBA, I think, maybe even more so than the rest of the big three in terms of the sporting leagues in our country, it's very predictable. I mean, it's very top-heavy. Usually the playoffs are pretty chalk. So I like having some new blood in there. I like having kind of a different matchup this year. I was very curious to see how the rest of the country would respond. The NBA playoffs, majority of the ratings have been pretty good so far. The finals have been down thus far. What do you think about this matchup? Is this good for the NBA? Is it bad for the NBA? Where do you come down on all that?
I always want to believe that the sport is the draw. You know, this comes up often with baseball, and you know, people from New York will tell you baseball's better when the Yankees are in the World Series, and you know, I always want to say horse pucky. You know, the World Series is the World Series. If you're a baseball fan, you're going to watch it.
That's right.
But that being said, I get pulled in by the stars too, and this would be better for the NBA if Milwaukee was winning this thing. I think this because Giannis is the guy that sort of can take center stage, and people have had their eye on him for a while. And if this felt like it was a coronation for him, and for him taking his rightful place now among the biggest stars of this game, I think things would be trending in the other direction. But Chris Paul's not that guy, and it just seems like the way this is going that the ratings are just going to get worse from here, because I don't think the casual basketball fan feels like they need to tune in and see this right now.
Well, especially if Milwaukee can't win a game.
Yeah,
I mean, this is pretty important Game 3 coming up, because they go down 0-3. I don't know how many people are going to be watching Game 4.
Suns and 4 are still alive.
Yeah, it still is.
And coming off a 5-game Stanley Cup final that really wasn't that competitive, it's sort of a womp womp kind of little stretch we're going through here right now.
Yeah, it is. So we'll see if the Bucks can rebound in Game 3. We've seen this happen already in the playoffs. They went down 0-2 to Brooklyn, came back home, won both games in Games 3 and 4. And then ultimately won the series in 7 against the Brooklyn Nets. So it's looking bleak for the Milwaukee Bucks right now. It's the second time I've called them Milwaukee Butts in the last 2 weeks. It's looking bleak right now for the Milwaukee Bucks. But we've already seen early in this playoffs this same scenario play out.
Maybe they've got the Suns right where they want them.
Maybe so. We'll see what happens on that front. Starting in Game 3 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A big one last night here at Nissan Stadium between Nashville SC and Atlanta United. And David, I got to tell you, and I said this on Twitter last night, and it's been kind of amazing to watch how this season has played out for Nashville SC. That was their 12th game last night. They have drew, I guess is the correct term, 7 times. So that means 7 times there's not been a winner or a loser. And I said this on Twitter. I love that Nashville is becoming more of a soccer city. We talked about the World Cup qualifiers coming to town on Nissan Stadium on September the 5th yesterday with Scott Ramsey, who we had on our show. I've been to a lot of Nashville SC games. I've been around Nashville SC since the very, very early days of it coming in, even before the USL team was taking place. So I've been able to watch this thing grow into what it is now. But, David, I got to tell you, one of the things that drives me nuts about soccer is how frequent draws happen. That's one thing I cannot program my mind to get used to. David, I'm used to a winner, and I'm used to a loser, and all these draws, I don't know what to make of it.
It's soccer. It's a different game. I don't know what to tell you. I have a long history covering soccer, going back to the doing some stuff with the U.S. national team back in the early '90s. The athletes are different. It's just a different animal from top to bottom. If you're professing your admiration for soccer's place in this town, you're just going to have to get on board with this, because this is what it is.
I know.
This is what it is.
We even had fans last night tell me, it is what it is. I'd rather see a game decided by a draw than I would a penalty kick or a shootout in hockey. And
at least
I don't agree with that, but I guess maybe.
At least last night it was 2-2, and I believe there was a goal that was waved off.
Yeah.
There were moments of excitement. It wasn't one of those 0-0 just nonsense games
those
that you'll
are the worst.
see sometimes. I do feel like Nashville SC is starting to finally recapture a little bit of that. I think they had such momentum, the way the whole thing came together, and the way the city led by in this bid led by John Ingram and crew leapfrogged the field to get the expansion bid first of all, and the excitement over the stadium construction and everything, and then the stadium construction is going to take longer than everybody wanted, and then there was the pandemic and everything, and it felt like Nashville had lost so much of that momentum with with the local fan base here that where it was kind of getting beyond just the hardcore soccer people or was sort of retreating back to the hardcore soccer people, and now there is a certain excitement that I'm starting to feel and starting to note again that people are like, hey, this is not going to be one of those 5-year builds to respectability for an expansion team. This is a team that's in the mix right now and is worth keeping an eye on.
Well, now starting to spend some money too, and bringing in Ake Loba, that's $6.8 million. That's a heck of an investment at the MLS level, and nearly 23,000 people in attendance last night at Nissan Stadium between Nashville SC and Atlanta United. So I know not the result that Nashville SC fans wanted last night. We talked about it yesterday. Tony Husband, Nashville SC play-by-play voice on the show, said it was an important game for Nashville SC to win. Based on Atlanta, they had some starters out. I know Nashville SC did as well. And you could tell they missed Walker Zimmerman last night defensively. Some uncharacteristic mistakes made defensively last night by Nashville SC. But I thought a game where 3 points were available to them. They were the better team. They should have captured the 3 points. And one of those situations where a draw in that instance, probably a disappointing result if you're Gary Smith and Nashville SC. And he said as much after the game last night.
Well, they had 2 goals to go up 3-1 that were both wiped out. And then immediately after that, Atlanta scores to tie it.
Yep. Talk about a momentum swing.
That's right.
That's not what you want at the home crowd there. And we'll see if Loba is in the lineup starting next week against Chicago.
Yeah, and you don't spend that kind of money to bring him along slowly, that's for sure.
Put him in there. I think there's probably a pretty good chance he'll be in there.
There is a good chance
against Chicago. And we'll see what sort of a difference he can make right off the bat. We're off and running today here on Robby and Rexrode. David Beauclair in for Joe Rexrode today, taking your thoughts all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, we switch gears and get into the Nashville Predators. Lots of things on the checklist for David Poile as Nashville Predators general manager this offseason. What should be the next move? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5. The Game, streaming live on YouTube, on Periscope, and on Twitch as well. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. David Beauclair in today for Joe Rexrode. And David, already one move made by the Nashville Predators in advance of the expansion draft coming up, which is now less than 2 weeks away, with Seattle coming into the league this next season. Victor Arvidsson traded to the Los Angeles Kings, a second-round pick in this year's draft in return for the Predators, a third-round pick in next year's draft as well. Let's start with your thoughts there, because it's the first time we've seen you since this trade was made. What did you think of that trade for the Predators, Victor Arvidsson going to the LA Kings, and what did you think of the return with a couple of draft picks heading back this way for the Predators?
I think they got a pretty good haul for the guy. You know, when you're talking about somebody, he's not an old man at 28, but he is sort of an old 28, or has looked it the last couple of years. It gives them a chance to get out from under a contract that for the most part has been a good one for them, and maybe maybe it's the right time. You want to get out before the return on your investment really starts to decline, and it certainly has been in decline. I understand, and I certainly get Victor Arvidsson's appeal. He's always been an easy guy to like, an easy guy to root for, a guy that you're happy to have on your team. But for the most part, and this is where I think David Poile needs to think this way a little more often. He's not a guy who's had a lot of great playoff games. He's never really been the same guy in the playoffs that he is in the regular season. And David Poile's theory is always, you get in the playoffs and you see what can happen. And he's really good at getting this team to the playoffs, right? My sense is, I want guys who are going to win games in the playoffs for me. And so if I'm David Poile, I'm looking at this roster saying, okay, who else has not been the same guy in the playoffs for me? You look at Chicago, for example. Chicago's in and out of the playoffs, but when they're in, boy, they're in, right?
Yep.
And they're winning cups. So would you rather be a Blackhawks fan and say we've won 3 cups in the last however many years, or the Predators fans still saying, hey, we're going to get there at some point? I mean, I don't know that you're going to get there doing it this way. So David Poile has said wholesale changes aren't coming. I guess long story short, my question is, why not?
Yeah, and the expansion draft, the next thing on the list. And David Poile said last week on Darren Donick and Chase that he'd like to have a pretty good idea of what Seattle's going to do heading into that draft, or heading into the expansion draft. I wonder what that constitutes. I mean, if you're David Poile at this point, I know you don't have to determine what your protection list is going to look like until the 17th, but they've been working on this for months, probably over a year at this point. They know who they're protecting at this point, especially with Victor Arvidsson now gone. So David Poile and the Predators know what their protection list is going to look like. The biggest question to me remains, is there any way that you can get one of those 2 contracts of Johansson or Duchesne off the books? And I think if you had to pick, it would probably be Duchesne. Is there any way you can do that? Does Seattle have any appetite to that whatsoever? And if they do, how steep of a price are you going to have to pay? That's the big question that David Poile's got to figure out if he can swing it, I think, in the next couple of weeks moving forward.
Yeah, but what he's looking for, I think that comment, what he's looking for is certainty. He doesn't want to be surprised, and nobody in his line of work wants to be surprised at any point. So, and he, going back to 1998, he certainly afforded GMs around the league every opportunity to do that too. He's just looking for a little karma, I guess, in terms of, look, I called everybody. What do you want? How can I help you? Yep. Things like that led to Kimmo Timonen being here, which was one of those deals. Patrick Schellberg, who led the team in goals, or I think the second year of the franchise. He was part of some of those discussions. Thomas Vokoun came out of those discussions. Those kinds of things can be really fruitful for a team in Seattle's position. And so if you're David Poyle, you're thinking, okay, this is where karma comes back around and is good to me, and I can get a contract off the books. And but to the point, what else are you going to have to give up for Seattle to take that salary cap hit? I mean, the good news is, people forget the salary cap in the NHL. There's also a salary floor.
Yep.
Seattle can't just do this on the cheap. And if they want to get a bunch of younger, cheaper guys, this kind of thing might be a really good move for them.
Ryan Porth, as you look at the moves coming up for the expansion draft for David Poyle, the moves already made with Victor Arvidsson out the door, how active do you think this offseason could be for the Predators? We've already seen one trade. We know that something's going to happen in the expansion draft. Could it be even more active beyond that in terms of player movement with this current roster intact? How active do you think David Poyle will be in this offseason?
I think it depends on whether or not Seattle takes Duchesne and whether Poyle can get Seattle to take Duchesne. And that would entail throwing in one or two extra assets to get Duchesne in Seattle. But if they clear that $8 million off the books, then I think you could see David Poyle try to tinker some other things or make, some lower level trades to bring in different players, different style of players onto this roster that might be better fits for John Hines' system. I could absolutely see that. But if Seattle does not take Duchesne, I don't really know how much David Poyle can do from a financial standpoint. If Seattle's coming away with Calle Yarncroke, you're only getting $2 million off the books at that point. And I would be surprised if they trade Ryan Ellis at the draft or anything like that. Although that could be something that could get you even more assets or a forward that could be a pretty good fit. So I think a lot of it depends on Duchesne, honestly. And if they can move Duchesne, that could start a domino effect of different moves that Poyle is able to make.
And I still find it unlikely that that's going to happen, David. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, if I'm Seattle, I know I'm asking for the moon if you're asking me to take Matt Duchesne. And I just wonder, how far is David Poyle willing to go to get this contract off the books? Now, remember, it is 5 more years left of this deal. So there are 5 more years left of Matt Duchesne. And, look, we've seen it. Duchesne's a good player. It's not like he's not been productive before, but there's just been zero signs in his time in Nashville that that's going to happen. I just wonder how far you're willing to go if you're David Poyle to try to help get that contract off the books and how much it's going to take in terms of what I have to assume is going to be a heavy asking price from Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, he's 30 years old. Not getting any younger, not getting any tougher. His shooting percentage has been in steady decline here the last couple of years. I mean, you just look at it. I mean, this was a guy who a couple of years ago everyone in Nashville was doing cartwheels, right? Yep. He was the missing piece. It was and turns out that's it. Even if he plays better than he played, say, this past season, he still doesn't. He'd have to be way better than that to be the missing piece. And I don't know that he has, that he has that in him anymore at this point. This is a classic case of you paid a guy for what he's done, not for what he's going to do for you. And now you're looking at, and you're right. If given the length of that contract. Seattle can say, David,
it's got $40 million left on that contract.
Let's be serious here. But I mean, Predators fans for so long couldn't wait to be a cap team, right? That was going to be a sign that this franchise had arrived, and they're a cap team
They're a
now,
cap team
and this
for sure.
these are some of the joys that come with that come with being a cap team, and it almost makes you long for the days when Nashville was always in the bottom third, but you knew that when the trade deadline came around, if they had to, they could take on contracts and do that sort of thing. It's not quite as easy as it was back in the day in that regard.
Well, and how this plays out with the expansion draft is going to be interesting because, Porth, I agree with you. I think depending on who Seattle takes, that really shapes up what David Poile is able to do the rest of the offseason. Like, I fully expect now that with Arvidsson off the books, Granlund's going to be a part of the plans. Like, they're probably going to re-sign Mikhail Granlund. I would be surprised at this point if that doesn't happen. But beyond that, I don't know how much they're going to be able to do when you factor in that you've still got to sign Forsberg to an extension, theoretically, Matthias Ekholm to an extension, and I know that those deals would not kick in this year, but it's all about looking down the pipe too. And
don't sign Ekholm.
This cap's not going up. You don't want them to sign Matthias Ekholm?
No.
Really?
Ekholm's a classic case of a guy who is completely different in the playoffs than he is in the regular season. Look at how his turnovers go up.
Yeah.
Look at I just go back to that Winnipeg series a couple years ago. Those forwards were coming after him, and he just coughed the puck up over and over again. I mean, that's the. Matthias Ekholm's a good player. I get that, but he's not a guy who has helped this team win in the playoffs, and it's been a pattern. I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this the other day. You go back to 2016, and what was at that point the biggest game in franchise history, Game 7 in the second round against San Jose, and what happens? Predators lose 5-0. Shea Weber commits 5 turnovers, and in the offseason, Shea Weber gets traded away. And I think that trade was a result of Peter Laviolette saying, I need a different style. I need a guy who can skate more back there. I wanted it to be a case of the Predators saying, if this is our best player in our biggest game ever, and this is what we get from him, that's not good enough.
Sure.
that should have been what the thinking was behind that trade. And that's why I say I go back to, at a certain point, enough with this. Let's just get to the playoffs. No, get me players who are going to win playoff games for me. And I don't think the Predators have enough of those guys.
What about
now.
Forsberg? Because Forsberg's probably, if you sign him to an extension, my guess is he's probably going to cost you somewhere around $7.5
I was going to say
$8 million.
at least $6 million, probably upwards of that.
So, look, I think Forsberg's a very good player. I don't think Forsberg on a Stanley Cup winning team is a first-line player.
No.
So, are you comfortable giving him a long-term deal that's $7.5 million per year?
At this point, no. I said a few minutes ago, I want the whole. Why not the wholesale changes? What had this group peaked at 2017. Let's try something different here now. We've seen this show. We've seen this act.
So David Beauclair's he's here for the rebuild.
I'm
for the
blowing
Nashville
it up.
Predators. David Beauclair's blowing it up. If he's David,
Give me the
Poile
button. Give
and
me the red button. I'm pushing it.
David Beauclair always tempted to hit the red button. I would be too. That's why they don't put those red buttons around me. Well, speaking of changes, there's some rumors out there that are swirling about with the Nashville Predators that some changes could be made. We'll get to those coming up next with some comments from some very prominent people in the hockey world. That's coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, David Beauclair, Ryan Porth here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, discussing the Nashville Predators and some potential moves that could be made this offseason. And we've talked about players that are already on the roster and what their futures could look like. But there's a name that's being floated out there from the back-to-back Stanley Cup winners that could be connected to the Nashville Predators as well. And I'm talking about Tampa Bay Lightning forward Alex Killorn, who, of course, has won back-to-back Cups with the Lightning, a really good player for them, one of those playoff-type players that you just talked about, David Beauclair, that helps you win
exactly
in the playoffs. And Elliot Friedman of the 31 Thoughts podcast, who, of course, joins Darren Donick and Chase every week, alongside Jeff Merrick, who was on our show the other day. We're talking about Alex Killorn and the possible connections to the Nashville Predators on their latest edition of the 31 Thoughts podcast. Here's what Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick had to say about Alex Killorn.
I mentioned David Poile earlier, talking about the Arvidsson deal and Seattle essentially saying if Arvidsson's available, we're taking him. So they traded him to Los Angeles to pick some things up. Poile also said, he's looking at doing some things with this team that don't expect the exact same squad to come back. What do you hear? What do you know about Nashville?
Well, like I said, I think they're going to try to extend Ekholm. I just wonder, I do think that is something that is on the table that they've been working on. I still think they're going to try to extend Granlund. I know they were a team that liked Killorn, so I'm wondering if they're looking at what Tampa might and might not be able to do. Other than that, nothing too big that I've heard right now. But that doesn't mean he's not working on something. It means it hasn't got me yet. I haven't gotten to it yet.
So that was Elliot Friedman on the 31 Thoughts podcast saying the Predators, he knows they've been interested in Killorn. That's not the first time that I've heard Elliot Friedman say that. He brought that up a few weeks ago on Darren Donick and Chase as well. We know Tampa Bay, they've got some salary cap gymnastics they're going to have to do this offseason, and it's going to require them to lose somebody. Now, it's not going to be anybody in their core. Stamkos, Kucherov, Hedman, Point, all those guys are going to be back. But the Andre Palats of the world, the Tyler Johnsons of the world, and the Alex Killorns of the world may have to be, at least one of those, may have to be on the move this offseason. So, David, what do you make of the idea of a player like Alex Killorn, who has been a good player for Tampa Bay, productive in the playoffs as well? What do you make of a guy like that being a target for David Poile, given where this Predators team is right now with their roster?
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. A guy who had 33 points in the regular season this year and then, threw up 17 in 19 games in the playoffs this year. His numbers, his playoff numbers over an 82-game season, he'd be a 50-point guy, which is in his career, he's never scored 50 points in the regular season over an 82 game, including having played 82 games a couple times. He's a guy who elevates his play. He's a guy who hits. He blocks shots in the playoffs. And it's not just he didn't just do it this year. He has a history of doing this. This is exactly the sort of guy that I think you need to add to this team, to add some You talked about John Hines' style of play, and John Hines has said over and over again, more difficult to play against, more difficult to play against. This is a guy who can give you some of that, not just give you some of that, but give you some of that at the right time of year. And that's and again, that's what I think this team needs to start thinking about a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Alex Killorn would come in and he brings a lot of those things. My question and my concern would be is, you talked about the points he's put up in the playoffs, and he's been a really good player. He's been playing with Anthony Cirelli and Steven Stamkos as well. And I just wonder on this team, with this group, especially with this group of center icemen who have just not been able to be productive, and quite frankly, they've not been able to elevate their line mates the last couple of years, would Alex Killorn be the same guy here in Nashville?
And on top of that, he's going to be 32 by the time the next season starts. So, again, Are you going to get more out of this guy than he's done to this point in his career? No, you're not going to. I mean, the hope is that you would get him for a couple of years and he's still the same player. Sort of like a Mike Fisher deal. I think, but I'll never forget this when the Preds traded for Mike Fisher, because Mike Fisher was a guy who apparently back in 1998 during the draft there was a lot of discussion among the Preds personnel people about Mike Fisher, and it was ultimately decided that they wouldn't take him. David Poyle was one who wanted to take him. He I guess ceded to his scouts at that point, and never sort of got over his love for Mike Fisher. Finally got Mike Fisher here, and I remember going around the locker room one day, and Ryan Suter kind of grabs me and he's like, "Why are people so worked up about Mike Fisher?" He goes, "He's a good player." He's like, "But he's not a 25 goal guy. Like what are we talking about here?" He's like, "We need a goal scorer." And but you did get in Mike Fisher the guy that he had been in Ottawa, and a guy who helped this team in a lot of ways. And that's that's what you'd be looking for. Like if just say hypothetically the Preds do something, they get Alex Killorn here. If I would hear David Poyle say, "Well, this is a guy who has scored 26 goals in his career. We think we can put him in situations where he can score 30, maybe 35 for us." He has scored 26 goals once in his career. Yeah. He hasn't scored 20 any other season in his career, right? I mean, so let's be real about who he is and what he can contribute to this team. But if you can get that for a couple years, given what we've seen from this team in the playoffs the last couple years, I think a guy like Killorn would really help.
I do too. And look, you talk about the little things that he does. Obviously, that's the way John Hines wants his group to play. Like that was what was part of amazing to watch the other night in Game 5 as Tampa Bay is closing that game out. I mean, first off, it was clear they were superior to Montreal in pretty much every way. But the commitment level that they had to just doing the little stuff, blocking shots. I mean, Killorn got knocked out of the series because he threw his body in front of a shot, blocked it, and he broke his leg. And then he had surgery and wanted to play 3 days later. I mean, it's because that's what hockey players do. But just the little things, they're such a skilled team, but they can beat you any way you want to play. And that's what stands out about Tampa Bay. I still think this Predators roster, they've got some work to do on that front.
And let's be real about this too. If you watch Tampa Bay play, it's not as simple as saying, well, if we can get one or two guys off that roster, put them on our team, well, because those guys play together better than any other team in the NHL right now. I mean, you watch them when a defenseman attacks, the way the forwards cover and the way their spacing in the offensive zone is always so good. It's just it's more than just the commitment of players. They're well coached in ways that other teams aren't. They all buy into that system that they have going on there, and I can't recall the last time I've seen a roster of 20 players that works together as well as that entire roster seems to work together.
They remind me of those good Red Wings teams back in the 2000s with just how in sync
they just
that entire
they all
team
knew
is.
what each
right.
one what they were all doing.
And the other thing with Killorn is they have not had that classic net front guy since they traded Patrick Hornquist, and Killorn is as close to that guy as they would have had since Patrick Hornquist.
That's what he does. He gets in front of the net. There's no question about that.
And he's basically the same money as Arvidsson. 2 years left on his deal. So it's not like you're taking on a 6-year contract.
Yeah.
And for the same money as Arvidsson's production lowered in the playoffs, and Killorn raises the stakes in the playoffs.
I think something worth considering if you're David Poyle and the Predators. And like I said, it's not the first time I've heard Elliot Friedman mention his name in connection to the Predators. So,
but again,
Friedman usually doesn't just throw stuff out there like that.
No, that's right. And all this stuff, though, is on hold until after the expansion draft, right?
Right.
I mean, nobody can really do anything until, or at least until you have some certainty, as we talked about, with what Seattle's going to do.
Right.
But Tampa might want to get something for Alex Killorn before the expansion draft because Seattle might take him.
But they're not going to take anything from the if you're the Predators, you'd want to give up something too, to keep your expansion list, your protection list in place. It becomes so hard to make a deal when there's an expansion draft looming.
And I would have to assume, like if you're David Poile and you traded for Killorn before the expansion draft, obviously you're protecting him at that point. So you're definitely going 4-4. Like you're not protecting 5 defensemen anymore because it would be Forsberg, it would be Cunnin, it would be Killorn, and I would assume they're not going to expose both Sissons and Yarncroke.
Well, maybe Tampa would take Fabro.
Would you do that? He's 22, first-round pick.
Fabro is a player to me that if you keep hoping that he's going to get to a first or second pair level and be consistent at that level, that his value might diminish in a couple of years.
So you would do it?
I would think about it.
Okay. It's interesting. I'd have to look at Tampa Bay's list of defensemen they've got to protect too, because I would assume they wouldn't want to lose him for nothing. But yeah, certainly worth looking at, I guess, if you're David Poile and the Predators. See what happens on that front. Got more to say on this topic coming up next. Taking your thoughts as well on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We'll also get to something that David Beauclair brought up earlier this hour about the state of the Predators franchise. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
Like I said, I think they're going to try to extend Ekholm. I just wonder, I do think that is something that is on the table that they've been working on. I still think they're going to try to extend Granlund. I know they were a team that liked Killorn, so I'm wondering if they're looking at what Tampa might and might not be able to do. Other than that, nothing too big that I've heard right now. But that doesn't mean he's not working on something. It means it hasn't got me yet. I haven't gotten to it yet.
That was Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet on the 31 Thoughts podcast with Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman. I guess soon to be the 32 Thoughts podcast in a couple of weeks when Seattle comes into the fold in the expansion draft. Talking about Alex Killorn and maybe whether or not the Predators could be interested in his services from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. We've got a commenter on Periscope that says the Preds have to get more speed on the ice. And David, I don't know that speed is the word that comes to mind when I think of Alex Killorn. He's a bigger guy. He gets to the front of the net, and a guy that is going to do kind of the hard areas and get to the puck battles and win those pretty often, fairly regularly. But I don't know if speed is the word that comes to mind when I watch Killorn play.
No, he's not. And this is sort of the constant game, though. And I said this back in 2017 when David Poile said he was going to honor the players' request to try and keep the bulk of that roster together. If the Stanley Cup is a moving target.
Yep.
Yes, they got really, really close that year. That doesn't mean that they stayed close. If you didn't win it, you've got to keep moving and try and catch this thing. And they were right. The Predators were very right in 2017 when they got faster, and they looked like almost every night they were the fastest team on the ice that whole season. They just look that way. They don't look that way anymore. I don't think you need to be. The NHL has gone back a little bit more to some of the tougher grinding sort of style of play. But I don't think you need to be as fast as you were 5 years ago.
Yep. If
you're the Predators. But I agree that they need to get a little more overall speed right now. And what I really think they need to this point, though, too, is they need tougher defensemen. We were talking about Dante Fabro, the last segment. Fabro, to me, worst case scenario is he becomes another Matthias Ekholm, right? So again with Ekholm, I don't think you need both of these guys. I think do you want to hang on to Ekholm and let him get older? Do you want to hang on to Fabro, let him grow into whatever he's going to become? That's fine. Either one of those guys, I'm good with. I'm okay with keeping one of those right now. But I want. You're not going to find Victor Hedman. Let's face it.
Right.
But I want somebody who's going to make people pay a price for going to the front of the net, especially now that UC Saros is the goalie, right? Like, UC Saros isn't seeing over anybody when they plant themselves in front of the net. Pecorine can look over people's shoulders. He could find the puck and whatnot. With Saros, it's all about being able to follow the puck and keep your eyes on the puck and connecting the dots and getting in the right spots, which he does incredibly well. So you're going to need somebody, more than one guy, that's going to take care of the front of the net. Roman Josi, as great as he is not driving anybody away from the front of the net.
No.
Matthias Ekholm likes to try. I love when Matthias Ekholm tries to play tough guy. It cracks me up. But he's not that guy either. Ryan Ellis is not moving anybody away from the front of the net. Dante Fabro's not moving anybody away from the front of the net. I mean, you've got to get somebody on your one player at least on each of your first two defensive pairs that's going to take care of your goalie.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. And a third D pair type guy do that? Sure. But also, a lot of times your third defense pair is such a liability in other parts of the game that, they can move people out of the way. Problem is, when you get skated around like a traffic cone, it doesn't matter if you're moving people out of the way or not.
That's when I say, I'm up for wholesale changes. I'm up for move on from Ekholm. Let's move on from Ellis. Let's keep these guys going. I'm not sold that Granlund's a guy that has to stay. I mean, let's get younger. Let's get tougher. Let's try something different with this.
If you were going to move on from Ekholm, why did you not do it last season?
Exactly.
Right before the deadline.
I would have done it.
His value then was so high.
His value was so high.
And part of what his value was if you were a team trading for him, you're getting him for 2 playoff runs, right? And now he's got 1 year left on the deal. Now, again, I don't think that Matthias Ekholm, if you wanted to extend him, I don't think he's going to cost that much. I mean, he's going to get a raise. He's at $3.75 million right now. He's going to get a raise. He is 31 years old, so it's not like a team's going to have to dish out, $7.5 million for Matthias Ekholm. I think he could end up somewhere around 6. But I just feel like if David Poile was thinking that way, why not do it this past season?
If the reports were correct, that you could have gotten a first round, maybe 2 first rounders for him, and it's possible that you could have. I mean, that's about what the Predators gave up for Paul Gaustad back in the day, right? Yeah. I mean, that was a third line center at best, more likely a fourth line center face-off specialist guy. If you could have gotten 2 first-round draft picks for Matthias Ekholm and didn't do it, that's criminal. That I don't care what kind of run, what kind of playoff push you were making. If you could have gotten that kind of return for that guy at that age, you had to do it. You had to do it.
Well, now you probably can't get that. I mean, he's got 1 year left on his deal.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's why I say if you didn't make that deal at the deadline, if it was there, and I don't know that it was there, but if somebody had offered that and David Poile said no, that's awful to me. That's awful to me because that gets to a point where that's too good a deal to pass up for the player that Matthias Ekholm is.
So, David, you brought up something earlier in the show that it's interesting. I was going to bring up right now in the show, and I'm glad you brought it up. And that is, The Athletic yesterday came out with a list of their salary cap era NHL franchise rankings. And the salary cap coming into play in the NHL in the 05-06 season. And they've kind of gone through the list here, and there's different criteria involved. Obviously, the most points awarded to winning a Stanley Cup. You get more points or fewer than that for losing in the Cup final, conference finals, and making the playoffs. And Pittsburgh is at number 1 on this list with 3 cups during that time and the points that they've accumulated. At number 14, which is basically right in the middle, is the Nashville Predators. Which, to your point, and you brought this up, they make the playoffs pretty much every year. I mean, when you start thinking about how often they've made the playoffs in the last 15, 16 years, it's right up there with your Pittsburghs and your Washingtons and your San Jose's, like the top teams in the league over that stretch. They've been past the second round of the playoffs 1 time. So if you're a Predators fan, how do you feel about all this? You've obviously you're there, you're in the tournament, you make the playoffs. I think Montreal is a good example this year. Sometimes all it takes is getting in and you can get on a magical run. But that's happened for the Predators 1 time where they've made it past the second round. How do you feel about where this franchise is in terms of being good enough to get to the playoffs and basically 1 time they've been good enough to do some damage in the playoffs?
And it happened 1 time for the Washington Capitals when David Poile was general manager there too. They got past the second round of the playoffs once, got swept in the conference finals. I mean, this is I say this all the time. If anybody thinks that something different is going to happen, they're kidding themselves. Like 2017 was the outlier, and it wasn't the start of a new norm for this franchise. So I give David Poile credit. He's tried different things. Early on it was we're going to keep our players till grim death, and then he got into Trader David mode for a little while. But the thrust of his moves are always the same, which is be good in the regular season, be good enough to get to the playoffs, and at this point, 20-some years of it, I'm a little bored with it. Does that mean you bump David Poile up to a GM emeritus position or whatnot? Let somebody different try. If I were a fan, I wouldn't hate that idea. I mean, to me, like the LA Kings are a good example. The Kings have they went to the playoffs looking at this list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just 7 times in the last 12 years. But they've won 2 Stanley Cups.
Yep.
Would you rather be the Los Angeles Kings or the Nashville Predators right now? Going to the playoffs every year and not winning cups and almost never even coming close to winning the cup.
I'll take the championship.
Personally, I'll be the Kings. Yes.
Well, and also the right now, like the Kings won 2 cups, they bottom out, and now they've got
their prospect pool is great.
They've got a bright future where they might be in a similar position in the next like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's what I mentioned the Blackhawks earlier. It's what the Blackhawks have done too. They're willing to be terrible for a year or two to get the payoff on the other end. Predators have never been willing to be terrible enough to be great. And it's a hard thing to get your mind around, but really that's sort of what it takes. You have to be terrible in the NHL to be great.
Yeah.
And David Poile is not willing to be terrible. And I don't say that like that's a personality flaw. Like I get it. We're all competitive people in our own way, but sometimes you have to think more long term, and I don't see a lot of that from this franchise.
Coming up next, we will switch gears and get into a little college football talk here. The 12-team playoff may be coming into effect here in a few years. What kind of effect is that going to have on bowl games, including the Music City Bowl here in our town? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in hour number 2 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, David Beauclair in today from SI.com for Joe Rexrode, who is on vacation in California. Ryan Porth here with you as well on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Going to have former Vanderbilt basketball player Shane Foster join us at 7:30. We'll get his thoughts on a variety of different topics. Scottie Pippen Jr. coming back to Vanderbilt. Name, image, and likeness laws going into effect as well. All that coming up with Shane Foster later this hour. Teron Davenport at 8, and former NFL tight end Vernon Davis joining the show at 9 o'clock as well. David, we had Scott Ramsey on yesterday from the Nashville Sports Council, the president and CEO of the Nashville Sports Council, and a lot of different things we got into with Scott, including some big events coming up in our city, the Music City Grand Prix, the World Cup qualifiers coming up, the outdoor hockey game next year between Tampa Bay and the Nashville Predators with the Stadium Series. But one of the things we got – finally, for sure. One of the things we got into was what this 12-team playoff in college football could do to the future of the Music City Bowl. We know that the Music City Bowl has been awesome here for the city of Nashville. Tourists coming in a week, and Scott Ramsey pointed this out, a week where otherwise everything was unoccupied there. And it's come in and it's had a tangible effect on the economy, a tangible effect on just the atmosphere here for the holiday weekend in Nashville. And here's what Scott Ramsey had to say yesterday on how this 12-team playoff could potentially impact the Music City Bowl somewhere down the line.
I think the bowl system in general served college football well. It's unique. I think you just look at Nashville and in the late 90s, that was a week that and we had zero tourism, and we built a brand new stadium. We had no shame about creating an event that we thought brought tourists to town, and it's done incredibly well. This will be our 24th year, and we're averaging 35 to 40,000 out-of-towners here for a few days, and really utilizing a city-owned facility in a maximum way to engage. So we built a New Year's Eve event behind it. That's one of our great weeks now, and from the business side, that's served our city well. Will it continue to have that kind of prominence on a national scene is undetermined right now, given how the structure is going to be at the top, and how will that impact the bowl system overall.
So you heard it there at the end from Scott Ramsey in that clip, some uncertainty about the structure of the bowls moving forward. If a 12-team playoff coming into effect, how does that affect all of the bowls behind the 12-team playoff? I've been to the Music City Bowl a lot. I've enjoyed it. I think we've had some matchups here that have been great. Also had a few duds along the way that you're going to get in bowl games. Some packed houses, some less than desirable crowds at Music City Bowls as well. My question is, if you're a college football fan and you want to see playoff expansion and the 12-team playoff comes into effect, do you care that it impacts bowls like the Music City Bowl somewhere down the line? What do you think the college football fan, how do you think they view the current system and how the 12-team playoff could affect bowls that we've become very accustomed to seeing, not only here in Nashville, but throughout the country as well?
I think if you're going to 12 teams, you have to rethink the entire college football season, not just bowl season. You need to rethink the whole thing and how it works, because you're going to have to shorten the regular season to start with.
Yep.
Because what's going to happen is draft prospects are not going to want to play 3 or 4 extra games at the end of the year. That they 2 is sort of asking a lot in the minds of a lot of these kids when you're talking about the money that's on the line here. To add another game or 2 to it, you're gonna have guys begging out of the playoff like crazy, unless you have an 8 or 9 game regular season, say, and be done with it. At which point, then, teams that aren't in the playoffs, what are you going to do with them? Are you saying, do you say, well, you know what? With everything we know about head trauma and the long-term effects of playing this game and whatnot, we think 8 or 9 games is good for kids this age, and we're going to be done with it? Or are we going to say, you know what, everyone deserves another home and away game from here. So we're going to, when we take the 12 teams out, now we're going to say, okay, we'll match up teams from different conferences. Maybe that's when you start your non-conference play, whatever. And we're going to give essentially everybody 2 more games, and then at that point, will anybody care about bowl games? I don't know. I think if you try to keep it as is, once the playoff starts, nobody's going to care about the Music City Bowl on a Thursday night, for example, when you've had playoff games one Saturday, you've got playoff games coming up the next Saturday. No one's going to care about that. So that's why I say you're going to have to rethink the whole thing on a number of levels, because as it is, the college football playoff has already diminished the value of most of the bowl games that precede it.
For sure.
But once the playoff starts, no one's caring about any of these other games at all anymore, I don't think.
Well, and especially if you go to 12, I mean, you're starting the playoffs earlier at that point. So you could have playoff games that I guess theoretically take place before the Music City Bowl would. I mean, you could shuffle the bowl schedule around, but there are
and a lot
tight
of these
schedules.
A lot of these games, for example, are ESPN properties, right? But if you're ESPN and you've got Alabama hosting number 8 Notre Dame on Saturday, and it's Thursday, and your Rickshaw City Bowl, whatever, is Thursday, and where is ESPN going to be devoting its coverage? ESPN's not even going to be covering its own games at that point. They're going to be talking about Alabama Notre Dame leading into that game. I mean, it's just the way that the business works. So I'm glad that college football is not saying, "Oh, the playoff has been great. Let's expand it. We'll do it this year." I mean, I hope that this whole process, while it feels like it's being dragged out, is because they are having to rethink this on a lot of different levels. It's not going to be as easy as just saying, "Well, we're going to bring more teams in the playoffs and it'll be great. We'll make more money." I mean, this is going to be the event that fundamentally changes college football as we know it in terms of the scheduling.
See, I think though with the bowl games, people are still going to watch. Like, they may not care as much, but with the legalization of sports gambling, people will have
there's that.
An investment in games within, whether it's the famous Idaho Potato Bowl or a playoff game. Oh, yeah. People are going to care if Ohio and Temple go down to the wire.
But how many people, there's still, sports betting is still not in that many states. I mean, it's growing all the time, but and how many people are really that invested? I don't. I mean, yes, that's a factor, but I think people care about what they see on TV, and if ESPN spends all day talking about the coming playoff game on Saturday, people aren't even going to know half the time that there's the Idaho Potato Bowl that night.
Well, plus it's just football. Like, the Pro Bowl is the most useless football game ever, and it still gets good ratings. I know that's NFL and this is college, but still, if there's football on a Tuesday night and you've got nothing else to watch on that Tuesday night in December, if you're a big football fan, you're watching that game.
We'll continue this conversation when we come back. Got some of your thoughts to get to as well on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. How would a 12-team playoff impact the bowl system? Do you care that maybe it impacts the Music City Bowl and other bowls like it throughout the country? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. The ultimate social experience is coming to Nashville. My Wine Society presents Blended Festival August 13th and 14th at First Horizon Park with live performances by Cascade, Little John, Matt Stell, Blanco Brown, Bryce Vine, and more. Enjoy Blended's massive 100-foot wine tasting tent and indulge in culinary activations by Nashville's hottest chefs. There's also Blended's relaxing wellness lounge, VIP village, and a whole lot more. Get Blended tickets on sale now at blendedfestival.com. Use promo code GAME at checkout for 10% off of your ticket. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, David Beauclair, Ryan Porth here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, discussing college football, the expansion to a 12-team playoff, and how it could affect the bowl system, including the Music City Bowl here in Nashville. Let's go to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Nate texting in says the lesser bowls will eventually become obsolete for Power 5 conferences, but I can see the Group of 5 conferences still being interested in the lesser bowls. I would agree with that. They still will be interested. My question would be, would the Music City Bowl be interested in hosting a Group of 5 matchup here?
Exactly, because the Music City Bowl has benefited greatly from its association with the SEC and particularly with I would say the Big Ten more so than the ACC in recent years. And if you're gonna, if you're all of a sudden getting Toledo against Texas State, are you going to be filling up all those hotel rooms that Scott Ramsey was talking about for that? I don't know. Nashville. The good thing is Nashville's always going to be a destination city,
sure.
and people are going to, if there's schools here, there's going to be people saying, "Oh, yeah, I want to." I've been wanting to go to Nashville. I'll go there. But it's not like getting, LSU against Nebraska in here. Mississippi State always brings a good crowd when they come. There's big changes coming to college football, and I'm okay with that. I want to see. I'm all about the big change today.
You are.
Well,
Beauclair just smashing the red button today.
Big time.
That's right.
Well, it may not be Group of 5 teams, but it could be like that 6-6 Arkansas team that is just not interesting to watch.
Although watching people in the stands call the Hogs may be interesting.
That's true. As opposed to the LSU and Texas A&M teams that came in here that were actually
good
to watch.
But Arkansas will always bring a crowd. Like that's the thing. That's all you care about if you're
sure.
Butch Spiriton and Scott Ramsey in this situation. Who's going to bring the crowd? And,
Kentucky brings a crowd.
Kentucky's always going to bring a crowd. Yes.
The Blue Mist.
As long as you've got an SEC school here, because as Atlanta is, as New Orleans is, Nashville now is. I think thanks largely to the identification with the SEC basketball tournament, Nashville has finally become an SEC destination city. It's one of those spots that now everybody in the conference, it was sort of weird that way for a while, where it was the biggest city in the SEC, but it sort of wasn't. It didn't have the same appeal or the same identity. But and I know Atlanta's not SEC, New Orleans isn't, but they sort of had their, between the Sugar Bowl and the conference championship football game, they had very prominent places in the conference landscape. Nashville now has that. I think that same sort of identity, and people have their play. People have been here enough that they have their play. That's going to be possible the way things are heading with this sport.
Well, maybe your point keeps the SEC affiliated with the Music City Bowl, but then like the Independence Bowl or something, or one of those lesser bowls ends up with the Group of 5 teams.
Yes.
Well, and I also wonder this, because
that's what you're negotiating like hell for.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But I also wonder, David, you brought this up. They're still kind of working through all this, and the model that's on the table right now is, I guess in the first round, your top 4 seeds are getting a bye, and the games are being hosted on campus for the first round of the playoff. A lot of people are like, well, why would you do that and then just move everything to a neutral site? Like, you're telling me because Alabama is a 1 seed, they don't get to host a game on their campus because they're too good? So people are talking about just do neutral sites for the whole thing. And if that's the case, like, look, I think if you're going to get a national title game or a semifinal game in the college football playoff, if you're Nashville, if you're Nissan Stadium, you probably need a roof just because of the weather and what it could be in December. But if it goes to 12 and you're talking about one of those early playoff games, like, do you try to shift your attention if you're Nashville from maybe the Music City Bowl as it is, if everything's going to change, maybe vying to get in the rotation for some of those college football playoff early spots?
1,000%.
Well, in a vacuum, yes. But again, let's go back to Scott Ramsey's point. This was Nashville has empty hotel rooms in a particular week of the year. What can we do to fill those hotel rooms? Like, still the whole point of this bowl was to fill hotel rooms in that week. So these are difficult. It's not just, hey, let's move the game. We can move the game. Are there hotel rooms available in the first part of December? Or is everybody here visiting Opryland and doing that sort of thing? These are all logistical issues that you and I don't think about on a regular basis, that I'm sure Scott Ramsey's losing sleep over, on a couple nights a year. But it's to me, the other issue too is, like, again, at what point do we start thinking about the student athletes? And are you going to send two entire teams of student athletes on the road for the entire month of December, basically, for 4 games for those teams that get it potentially, if they get to the championship? I mean, are you going to you're going to send them? You're just going to keep sending them out? There's going to be finals at some point in December, right? Shouldn't those kids? Like Vanderbilt basketball shuts down for a week. Belmont basketball shuts down for a week. I know. I assume Lipscomb does the same thing, in the middle of December, so that their kids can focus on finals, right? Like, football players don't get to do that. Right. I mean, at what point do we start taking that stuff into consideration too, or do we just go, all right, look, the Power 5 is the NFL's minor league, and that's how we're going to treat it, and we'll give these kids some sort of education while they're here, but it's not really a college degree. I mean, there's so much to this that I think if you really want to blow this whole model up, now's the time to do it.
Let's go to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texture that says player wear and tear seems to be an issue to move to 12-team playoffs. Number one, the FBS seems to be okay with it. And number two, reduced number of regular season games. One of those games could be a non-Power 5 non-conference game.
Yeah, I mean, I
think they need to get rid of those anyway.
Yeah,
if nobody cares about the Week 11 Auburn versus Morehead State matchup out there.
There's no question. You can't play an 11 or 12 game regular season and then have a 12-team playoff. It's the wear and tear. Whether the NCAA and the schools want to acknowledge or not, the players will acknowledge it, and you're gonna, you're seeing it more and more already as it is, and you're gonna see a huge faction of players at that point saying, "Oh no, I'm out. I've done what I'm doing. And all of a sudden you're gonna have the number 1 team in the country. 6 of its best players aren't going to be playing in the playoff because they're going to be focusing on draft prep, because it'll be presented as, I'm focusing on draft prep, but the reality is I don't want to get hurt in advance of the draft.
Which that's your draft prep right there, is to not get hurt.
That's exactly right. I mean, worked out okay for Jeffrey Simmons, but it You don't want to get hurt ahead of the draft is the thing. Although even that cost Jeffrey Simmons money, cost him about what, 10 to 15 spots in the draft, really. So cost him money on the front end, but he'll be okay eventually.
Yeah, I think he's going to be okay.
Yeah,
we got more to say about Jeffrey Simmons coming up later in the show as well. When we come back, I'm interested to get our next guest viewpoint on kind of what's going on right now in college sports, the evolution of college sports that's happening right before our very eyes. We'll be joined by Shane Foster, former Vanderbilt
always
basketball coach.
thoughtful Shane
That's
Foster.
right, the always thoughtful Shane Foster, coming up next here on Robby and Rexrode. Go to thegamenashville.com to check out Nashville's best deals. Deals happening now include a $50 Bad Axe Throwing Nashville gift card for only $25. Buy one, get one free for Beach Bend Park and Splash Lagoon. You can get yours now while they last at thegamenashville.com. We'll be right back with former Vanderbilt basketball player Shane Foster coming up next here on Robby and Rexrode, ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, David Beauclair, Ryan Porth here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. It's changing times in college athletics. Lots of things happening at once, including name, image, and likeness laws, changes to the college football playoff that we discussed in the last segment as well. An interesting time in college sports. And to help us talk more about that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in former Vanderbilt basketball player, Vanderbilt legend, Shane Foster, now on the program. Shane, thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Shane, what are kind of your thoughts on name, image, and likeness laws now coming into effect in college sports, sponsorship opportunities for these players, the ability to make some additional income now in the world of college sports? What do you think about this? Is this a good thing? What do you think this is going to do for college sports and the athletes involved, especially at the Power 5 level in these programs?
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's something that's long overdue. This should have happened a long time ago. Universities and NCAA and many of these companies have been making money off of college athletes at high returns for a very, very long time. And when you look at what some of these college coaches are making. Not saying they don't deserve it, but the players deserve it too. And so I like the fact that this ruling has been made to allow college athletes and student athletes to be compensated for their work and also to be able to get endorsements. I think that's an important piece of it as well. I think the reason I say it's a double-edged sword is because I don't think there's been enough guidance, rules, and kind of regulations around it to make it equitable and to also support these young kids who will now be coming into opportunities to sign contracts, to really deal with legalities around contracts, and many of these contracts are going to have clauses in them that mandate how these kids live their lives off the court, off the field, and those kind of things, because now you're representing not only your university, but you're representing a brand. And so I really think that the ruling might have been premature, even from the standpoint of doing their due diligence to make sure that there's some guidance, some laws, some rules around it to protect all entities involved. I think also to add to that, universities are going to have to do a better job of providing support to these student athletes in the area of finances and reading contracts and the laws behind it, sports law. Something that my late mentor, David Williams, was very, very passionate about and did some things at Vanderbilt University in that regard. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's good, but I also think, we need to put some guidelines in place to make sure that everybody's protected around it.
Shane, one of the interesting parts of this discussion to me has been time management, because we hear a lot from college athletes. I mean, you've got your schoolwork, especially at a place like Vanderbilt. You've got your schoolwork to take care of. Obviously, the demands of being a college athlete are there as well. Now you throw this into the mix. I want to take you back to your playing days at Vanderbilt, where obviously you guys were very good, some prominent players on that team, headlined by yourself. I mean, how do you think you would have handled these laws coming into effect during your playing days, both from, as you mentioned, the financial part of this, but also the time management part of this as well, where, you've got these endorsement opportunities, especially in a city like Nashville, where there are so many different things you can do, but you've also got to go to school. You've also got to put in the work to make sure you're getting your job done on the court as well. How do you think you would have handled this during your playing days?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. Number one, universities really do have the resources to surround players with the proper guidance, the help, the resources, the people resources to be able to help figure those things out. And Vanderbilt is a university that has always put that first. And so I know for a fact that as a result, I would have had all of the information, all of the support, all the people to reach out to that were in my corner who had my best interest in mind to be able to help navigate that. I also had an incredible support system in my family. And so, my dad, having played college basketball at the University of Southern Mississippi, a lot of who I am today was really directed and influenced by him. And so I don't doubt for a second that I would have been able, to handle that appropriately. When you talk about time management, I was one of those kids that, I kept a calendar even when I was in college. And on that calendar was everything from class to workouts to personal time playing video games. I really scheduled my time out in that way because it was important. I understood at a young age that, things don't get done that you don't write down, that you're not accountable to, and that you're not, paying attention to very closely. And so, I think I would have fared well in that regard for all of those reasons. But I also recognize the privilege that I had in that, and everybody doesn't go to a university that prioritizes that. Everybody doesn't come from a family that is able to support them in that way. And so I certainly can see both sides of it and see that there will be a number of people who would struggle.
Shane, are you at all surprised or impressed maybe by the number of athletes who immediately jumped on this opportunity and clearly were prepared for it? And what do you think that says about how important an issue this is to young people right now?
Well, I think that a lot of young people are smarter than we give them credit for. And this is not a conversation that just started and then all of a sudden a ruling was made. This is a conversation that has been in the making for quite some time now. And so many of your student athletes come from, families that, did things in a professional light that helped prepare them for this. I saw that Master P's son, who is at Tennessee State University, I believe he signed a $2 million endorsement deal. These are things that, they've just been waiting for the opportunity to really be exposed at this level. And so they're taking advantage of it, and rightfully so. It's going to be interesting, though, because, when you're on a college campus and you're commanding that kind of money for whatever reason, and you may or may not be the best player of your team, that's going to change that locker room dynamic. That's going to change some of the conversations that are had off the court. It's going to change how you show up on the court. And I think there's certainly some positives in that. There's also some negatives that I see that we're just going to have to, weather the storm and figure it out all together. And my hope is that the community, the business community, and certainly the universities, will rally around these student athletes and provide the support necessary and not be so judgmental. At the end of the day, these are kids. At the end of the day, these are 16, 17 to 20-year-olds, who are now coming into this amount of money, this amount of opportunity, and they need more support than they need criticism.
Former Vanderbilt basketball player Shane Foster on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And Shane, we threw this around yesterday here on the show with Vanderbilt in a city like Nashville, which is a much different city than you're going to find throughout the rest of the SEC in terms of opportunity here. How much do you think this could help Vanderbilt in terms of maybe even with recruiting, with name, image, and likeness laws coming into effect, and just the different endorsement opportunities that are available to players here in Nashville?
Well, honestly, I don't know if it helps simply because, it's an even playing field across the board. It's not an advantage that one school gets over another. And at the end of the day, you still got to get out on the court and produce. And that's the part of it that, I think people are really going to have to figure out. Is one, I brought up Master P's son at Tennessee State University. He's getting this deal prior to stepping foot on the basketball floor. And so there's going to come some opportunities like that. But, there's a responsibility to produce, to show up and be the right kind of person, all in the midst of becoming a young man and the man that you're going to be for the rest of your life. And so, I just don't see there being an advantage for any particular university. Of course, Vanderbilt has resources, networks. I was talking to somebody the other day. We literally have an executive in pretty much every major company in the country that is a Vanderbilt graduate. I'm sure surely that is an advantage from that standpoint. But who's to say that they're going to be willing to invest in athletes in this way? You just never know. And so I think we're just going to have to figure all of this out kind of as we go. But I don't see any one university having an edge on any others in this regard.
Shane, a big boost the other day for Jerry Stackhouse when Scottie Pippen Jr. announcing that he's coming back and will be available for Vanderbilt this season and explored the waters of the NBA draft, decided to come back to Vanderbilt. What sort of a boost does that give this Vanderbilt team? What do you think about Scottie Pippen Jr. coming back into the fold with the Commodores next year?
I got two words for you, man. Options and opportunities. Kids nowadays have more options than we ever had back when I was playing. I wouldn't doubt that, this NIL had something to do with Scottie coming back. If you can come back to college and still make money and get your degree and obviously have another year to develop. Scottie's a great player. He proved that last year and the year before. It comes from basketball background. He plays the game the right way. And I think this opportunity, to kind of test the waters was good for him and to go and be in that environment for himself and not have to rely on what others was telling him, but really go out there and see, how he stacks up against other talent that's going into the draft, and he saw an opportunity to come back to school and to better himself. And certainly Stackhouse is excited about that. Vanderbilt is excited about that. And hopefully we'll be able to put a product on the floor that's going to generate the kind of excitement in Memorial that was there when I played. And we're certainly excited about it as well. But kids, I mean, they just got so many options now. We had a lot of kids who transferred, so that's going to be a storm that we're going to have to overcome. But you know, I like Stackhouse in that position. I think he brings so much value and intangibles to the table that he's the right person for the job. And having Scotty at the head of the snake is going to be a huge part of that.
I was going to say, with the turnover in the roster, though, we saw at times last year when Jerry Stackhouse's offense is running the way it's supposed to run. It is really something to see and difficult to defend. How much does it help, or how important, I guess, is it to have the guy who's going to have the ball in his hands the most back running that offense for that team?
Oh, well, it's critical. You know, basketball now is about the pick and roll game. And then certainly having a point guard who understands how to use his body, how to see the floor, is a 3-level scorer. All of those things it just makes you more versatile as a team. And so, and somebody who can keep turnovers down. I know it's always, a tricky situation when you're putting a freshman or you're putting, an unseasoned player at that point guard position, because typically you are going to deal with more turnovers. They're going to take more unnecessary risk or what have you. But having somebody like Scottie Pippen Jr. leading the team in that regard, you have a proven leader, a proven scorer, somebody that the defense is going to have to game plan around. And so that just changes and frees up everyone else to be even that much more effective. So I think it's a really, really good thing. And going to Stackhouse's offense, I mean, it's really poetry in motion. The guy really understands the game at an extremely high level. It's a joy to watch after, me being with Kevin Stallings, one of the best basketball minds in basketball. And to compare that to what Stackhouse is doing, it's really poetry in motion. It's a wonderful thing to watch. You really see his basketball IQ coming out, and he helps the players, right? Like when you have a coach that really understands the game, they're able to put you in position to be successful. And that's what you see Stackhouse doing out there night in and night out. And then it becomes up to the players to be able to get in the gym, work on their game, bring more to the table, and get out there and execute.
Shane Foster, former Vandy basketball player, has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Shane, really appreciate you taking time to join us this morning. Always appreciate your perspective, and thanks so much. We'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks for having me. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. Thanks, you as well. Shane Foster, former Vanderbilt basketball great, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. And with that, David, it is time for Call Your Shot Friday. Here on Robby and Rexrode, we need your bold predictions in the world of sports. The NBA Finals underway, maybe a little Major League Baseball, MLS action in there as well. The Euros taking place this weekend with the final. All of it on the table at 615-737-1025. Our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. We'll do that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025, The Game.
sports weekend has arrived. You know what that means.
Shoot your shot.
It's time for Call Your Shot Friday with Robby and Rexrode on ESPN 1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
And it is that time of the week. Time for Call Your Shot Friday here on Robby and Rexrode. We need your bold predictions in the world of sports. Let us know on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. The NBA Finals underway, the Predators and the expansion draft coming up in a couple of weeks. Take it any way you want to take it at 615-737-1025. Joe Rexrode not here this week. Elijah Campbell was here last week while Ryan Porth was on vacation. So, Ryan Porth, you've been off of Call Your Shot Friday for a couple of weeks. And David Beauclair, you were talking about last time you were on Call Your Shot Friday. It did not go well, but that, David, is the point of Call Your Shot Friday. We need bold predictions, not easy ones here on the show.
Yeah, my big one I remember was I said the Phillies were about to go 8-2, 8-2 over their next 10 games.
You did.
I'm not sure they even went 2-8.
It's been a tough draw out there.
That breakout that I saw coming, it was more like a breakdown.
What do you think about that Bryce Harper signing so far?
You know, I still when the Phillies are on, whether they're playing the Braves or they're on MLB Network, I'm still flipping back and forth. I want to watch the guy hit.
Yeah.
I'm it hasn't worked out the way you wanted, or certainly I wanted, but I'm checking him out. I still want to see him hit. I do.
I predicted last week that the Tampa Bay Lightning would finish off the sweep of the Montreal Canadiens.
Ooh.
They were a couple of posts away.
So close.
Didn't work out. They did get it done in 5. So a tough one there. But I was almost there.
You were close.
But we determined last week that calling the sweep was actually more of a called shot than in 5. Because we had a lot of people texting in saying Tampa was going to win in 5. Because at that point they were up 2-0 in the series. I was like, well, yeah, 5 seems pretty reasonable. Calling the sweep we felt like was more of a called shot.
Sure.
But didn't work out that way.
I loved Kucherov calling out the Canadiens fans.
Awesome. That was amazing. That was potentially the greatest Zoom press conference that we've ever seen.
It might have been. That was tremendous.
And the Canadiens fans on Twitter,
they are
have been salty about that.
Golly, they are salty at Nikita Kucherov.
I am sure.
He is going to get booed in the Bell Center forever.
Yes.
And they will probably throw things at him.
And he's going to love it.
He'll love every second of it. So, great stuff by Nikita Kucherov yesterday. Ryan Porth, would you like to lead us off today and Call Your Shot Friday?
Sure, but I do want to pat myself on the back for a couple of called shots that did pan out. Okay. Now, I don't get many right, so when I do get a couple right, I do want to make sure.
Now, how far back are we going here?
This would have been mid-May.
Okay, all right.
No, not mid-May. This was after I came back from my first vacation, so a month ago.
Okay.
I said that Tampa was going to repeat.
I really went out on a limb on that one.
And they repeated.
Way to go.
I said this at the end of the Carolina series.
Now,
I don't think they had beaten Carolina yet.
If I recall, you had also predicted that they were going to lose in the first round. Is that correct?
That was like late April.
Oh, okay. All right.
I changed my tune on the Lightning.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll give you credit.
Okay. Thank you. I also said Mississippi State was going to win the College World Series.
You did, and that was
a couple
impressive.
Weeks ago.
That was impressive.
So I'm not happy about that because I definitely want to see Vandy to win. All right. I've got 4 called shots this week.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
So make note. Suns beat the Bucks in 5, and CP3 is the Finals MVP.
Okay. So in 5, this thing's over. So a quick series.
Yes.
Okay.
After we just established that a bolder prediction
would be a sweep.
Yeah. But okay, go ahead.
There's not as much difference between the Suns and Bucks as there was between the Lightning and the Habs. But I see your point.
We think.
We think. Shohei Ohtani is going to win the Home Run Derby and All-Star Game MVP.
Oh, yeah.
That's bold.
Because he's going to play both ways in the All-Star Game.
Yeah.
He's going to hit and he's going to pitch.
I like it. He, tell you what, you talk about a fun player to watch. The guy's fun to watch. I wish he played for somebody besides the LA Angels.
People have been clamoring for Major League Baseball to market their stars more. Yes. This is the guy that they need to be featuring in every single highlight mix that they have.
Did you see the report yesterday where he's not taking batting practice all year long and he still has 32 home runs? And he's a pitcher.
He's going to be taking batting
Don't need
practice
it.
Monday
Not
night.
any batting practice. It's whatever.
It's like Randy Moss saying he didn't stretch on game days.
Who needs it? It's overrated.
Just show up.
All right, I've got two more.
All right.
Jack Leiter and Kamar Rocker both go top 5 in Sunday's round 1 of the MLB draft.
Ooh, both top 5. Okay. That's a called shot.
And Matt Duchene goes into next season as a member of the Nashville Predators.
Well,
So no Seattle Kraken for Matt Duchene. Matt Duchene
Correct.
goes into next season as a member of the Nashville Predators. Very good. Nicely done on the called shots, Ryan Porth. David Beauclair, do you have any called shots?
I
this
do.
week? Here we go.
and I'm going Boulder.
I like it.
I'm going to pick up where Porth left off. I'm going Boulder.
Okay.
I don't believe the hype. I'm going Rocker Lighter 1-2 in the draft.
Oh, yes.
Ooh.
I think there's been a lot of disinformation being thrown around. A
little misdirection involved.
There was that was the talk at the beginning of the college baseball season. I'm saying it happens.
I like it. Very nice.
1 and 2.
Rocker
and Lighter.
Rocker 1, Lighter 2.
I'm not gonna either way.
Okay.
Either way.
Yeah, he gets credit either way. It doesn't matter.
For sure.
I can't sort out who's going first, but
Okay.
I think they're going 1-2.
And for people who don't know, the Pirates and the Rangers hold the top 2 picks in the draft.
I'm also going to say that Ohtani does not get out of the first round of the home run derby.
Ooh, eliminated early. The lack of batting practice comes to bite him.
It's not his thing. This is not. He's too much of an artiste. This is not going to be his format.
I like
the
that.
game. I think the game he's got. I like where you went with the All-Star Game MVP, but I don't see the home run derby as being his thing.
I like that.
Not Ohtani's jam.
All right.
I'm going to say
Look at you, not his jam.
before the NBA Finals is over, somebody's scoring 50 points in a game
Okay.
in this series. We're gonna get 50. I don't know who. Somebody's getting 50.
Booker's going to put up 50.
I mean, Giannis was close last night.
Booker, Giannis, Chris Paul might go crazy one night.
Giannis might have to get to 50 for them to
I
win.
was say, if Middleton keeps shooting like this, Giannis is going to have to score 70.
Somebody's getting 50. And finally, Phil Mickelson misses the cut at the British Open.
Misses the cut at the British Open.
He's going to be such a story off the PGA Championship, and can he get another major this year? No. Not even getting
Not
in the
even
weekend.
getting into the weekend. Oh, that's a tough one for old Phil.
That's my bold prediction.
Not a great showing for Phil and Tom Brady the other day in the match, losing to Aaron Rodgers and Bryson DeChambeau, who, by the way, I don't like that guy.
He is annoying.
He is really annoying. I think I'm on Team Brooks Koepka. I'll go quickly through
That's
mine.
a weird dude, yeah.
The Bucks are going to even up the series at home. They will tie this thing back at 2. We're going to have a competitive NBA Finals on our hands. Look, I said Bucks in 7 before the series began. I'm sticking with it. Give me Bucks in 7 to win the NBA Finals. Not feeling great about it right now, I'll be honest with you. But give me Bucks
We said
in
earlier,
7.
they've got the Suns right where they want.
Right where they want him. And I will say England wins against Italy in the Euro final coming up, and the country goes nuts. There were people falling over chairs in the stadium the other day. England wins against Italy.
I wonder how much those tickets are going for. I don't know. This final's at Wembley.
I know. So I would imagine
That's a sexy
quite a lot.
matchup.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
All right, let's quickly go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Ben texting in football, the Jacksonville Jaguars will win more games this season than the Vols and Vanderbilt combined.
Woo!
Jeez. Either expecting quite the year from Jacksonville or a real tough one
That's
for Vanderbilt
playing the game
and
the
Vols.
right way, though. That is bold prediction.
That's how we do it. Andrew from Dover texting in, the Suns in 5. Bucks will get one game at home, and the Suns will end it at home. Chris Paul is the MVP. So Andrew agreeing with Porth that Chris Paul is the MVP. Nate texting in, Poyle will surprise us and Elliott Friedman making more than one move this offseason, excluding the expansion draft. So Nate saying, in addition to the Arvidsson trade and the expansion draft, one more move coming. I wonder what move means. Does that mean signing somebody? Does that mean trading someone?
Yeah, he needs to clarify
Yeah, what
a
is
little
a
bit
move,
more on
Nate?
that.
Because I agree there'll be another move made. Is it another trade?
I read trade into that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what
Me
I
too.
read too. But I think that's a called shot. Another trade. is a called shot.
But Nate might be trying to get credit for that minor leaguer they sign on July 28th.
Yeah, we can't have that.
Yeah.
That is not going to fly here on Call Your Shot Friday. A very good edition of Call Your Shot Friday. We got more of your text that we could have gotten to, but we're out of time because we've got Teron Davenport coming up next. So we'll continue to take your text on the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. When we come back, we will get into the Tennessee Titans. Our man Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD, joins us next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesaling Studio here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in, hour number 3 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Robbie Stanley, David Beauclair from SI.com, Ryan Porth here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. And it is that time of the week we go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter and host of Talking with TD. Teron Davenport, presented by Freedom Tire Guys, Nashville's premier mobile tire company, online at freedomtireguys.com. TD, I already know how you're doing. Blessed to have you on with us this morning, my man. What's going on?
Hey, man, it's blessed to be on, man. Appreciate you guys having me on. And, hey, man, opportunity to talk to my guy David Beauclair, the matchstick man. I'm excited.
That's right. It's enough to get you fired up in the morning. That's for sure.
You know, we're Philly guys. He's got to talk nice about.
That's true.
That's right. It's automatic.
That's right. So TD, we had you on last week, and I was really interested to talk with you about last week's episode of Talking with TD because Delaney Walker was on there. Obviously, a big name around here, and Titans fans very interested to see and hear what he had to say. But one thing that kind of made the rounds over the weekend from that interview was His comments on Anthony Ferkser, using the word elite, says Anthony Ferkser can be elite, says he's got a lot of wiggle to him, which I loved. Delaney Walker's response there. What did you think of those comments that Delaney Walker threw out there about Anthony Ferkser? He thinks he's going to be elite.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that he said that. I think it's more from a pass-catching perspective, but one of the things that I also pulled out of that interview was talking to him about converting from a receiver to a tight end and just why he was able to do that and how the mindset is really what's so important. I think that really applies to Ferkser as well because, yeah, it's cool to be an elite-level pass catcher as a tight end, but you got to be complete, especially when you're considered tight end number one. So the blocking part of it is going to be something that he has to work on and get down pat before he could truly be elite.
TD, we talked earlier this week about this Titans offense and all the different ways that Julio Jones can impact it in terms of, what it's going to do for other players on the offense. But I want to talk to you specifically about Julio Jones himself. What do you think are expectations or fair expectations for Julio Jones from a production standpoint heading into the season? He's 32 years old. He had the injury last year, but for the most part, it's been very durable throughout his career. What do you think fair expectations are for Julio Jones from a production standpoint in this offense?
I think it's fair. 70 catches, 1,000 yards, 5 to 8 touchdowns. I think that's fair. I would go more towards 5 touchdowns. To me, that's a fair expectation. And I feel as if Corey Davis last year, right, he had 5 touchdowns. He was 16 yards short of 1,000 yards. And I think that a healthy Julio Jones is better than last year's Corey Davis. And then that also being considered, you're going to have Derrick Henry. He's probably not going to get the 378 touches, that he got last year. So there will be opportunities. And for me, watching those guys, it goes back to something that Rob Moore said, where he talked about his receivers taking pride on getting 1,000 yards off of 50 to 60 catches. It's a quality over quantity approach for them in the passing game, and I think that's really where Julio Jones is going to be able to apply himself and get the yards after catch. Be that guy catching the post off of play action and those kind of things. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for him.
When you say, TD, that you don't think Derrick Henry's getting the 378 touches, you think that's by design, or do you think that's sort of the way that the style of play is going to require this team to win games by maybe throwing the ball a little more and getting away from as much of the run-heavy stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's going to be more by design. They ran the ball. They were third most in the NFL as far as percentage, run-pass percentage. They ran the ball 47% of the time. The Ravens led the league at 50.3%. So I think that ratio is going to continue to change a little bit, and I feel a lot of that has to do with Arthur Smith because he just had that uncanny, just relentless sticking to the run regardless of what the situation was. They could be down 14 points in the fourth quarter, and you'll still see Derrick Henry getting the ball. And that was just his way of taking control of the game, and that's what he relied on. I don't know if Todd Downing's going to have that same adherence to running the football, and I think that's where the difference is going to be as far as Henry's carries are concerned. And they've already said, Tony Dew said it last year, they want to bring the carries down. And it's something that they wanted to do last year, but they were forced to have it go up just because he was just so critical as far as turning the momentum and taking control of games.
Do you believe in the curse of 370? Do you think that's going to be a real physical challenge for Henry this year?
I talked to Sean Alexander about that, and I agree with him. As long as Derrick Henry does the things that he needs to do, I don't think it's going to be a curse for him. And I've said it so many times, I feel like we're borrowing him from a different galaxy, and he's different. So I don't think a curse is going to apply to him.
Teron Davenport on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So, TD, if I had to ask you right now, which rookie do you think has the biggest impact for the Titans this season, what would your answer be?
Oh, it's an easy answer for me. It's Elijah Molden. And I just really feel like he, from the get-go, is going to be an impact player And I don't think it's just going to come as a nickel. I think it's going to be, as a safety too. And I mean, they could go a 3-safety look with him actually playing that nickel. So I feel he's just the most plug and play player that they selected, in my opinion. And he's also going to play on special teams. I spoke to him about that, and he said that's no problem. Whatever it takes to get on the field, he's going to do. So for me, I think it's Elijah Molden.
TD, obviously the Titans, after you bring in a guy like Julio Jones, you're going to receive a lot more attention nationally. And the Titans certainly have done that thus far, and we're just a few weeks away now from training camp getting underway. But Keyshawn Johnson, and we're going to play this audio coming up in the next segment, talked about maybe the Titans being a little bit overrated this offseason. And, of course, everybody goes back to the defense when they talk about that. Do you think that maybe the Titans are being overhyped this offseason, and that based on how the defense was last year, maybe they're a little bit overrated heading into the season? What do you think of that line of thinking that's out there from some, even in the national media?
Yeah, I don't think that they're being overhyped at all. Obviously, when you get a player, Julio Jones is one of the marquee players in the game. So when you acquire that type of player, you're going to get more attention. But I don't think they're overhyped because people are they're not talking Titans with the Super Bowl, right? When you talk about AFC, they're talking the Browns, they're talking the Bills, they're talking the Chiefs. And then you have Ravens, Colts, Titans, right, in that mix. But they're not considered one of the best teams in the AFC, and I personally feel they are. I put them against any of those. I think the Browns are probably number 2, but then the Titans are right there at 3. I personally feel they're a better team than the Bills, but that's a different conversation. So I don't think they're being overrated at all. I think they continue to just kind of fly under the radar just because their style of play, right? Everyone likes teams that score bunches of points but do it through the air. The Titans, they scored a lot of points last year, but a lot of it was on the ground, and people like passing and all of that stuff, and that's just not something that they do. They don't throw the ball 40 to 50 times a game.
TD, A.J. Brown has been really entertaining in a good way on social media throughout this offseason. And, here lately he's engaged with Justin Jefferson a little bit now. What do you see in terms of his the joy that he takes in sort of being this? What does that tell you about how he is as a wide receiver and how he approaches, or what's in store for him, I guess, going forward here?
Yeah, it's refreshing to see somebody be so good at the game and love it as much as he does. And I know in talking to him, just general conversation, talking about football, like it's very clear that he's a student of the game. I remember giving him guys, telling them to go look at Chad Johnson, telling them to go look at Stevie Johnson, and him coming back to me like, "Yo, man, that's Stevie Johnson. He's a nice route runner." So it just it's very clear that he loves football, and that's fun to hear. And then also what it tells you is that he's always going to work hard, because if you love doing something, you never have a problem putting in that extra work to get where you have to get and get better at it. And I think that's really the case. And I just feel if you look at, if there's an athlete that could do, he's the closest to doing everything perfect the first couple of years. And it goes, you look at his relationship with fans, right? Having a kid come on his IG Live, and the kid gave him his report card, and then he sent him an autographed jersey, right? Or getting a message on Twitter that somebody made a painting of him and actually going and signing that painting for the young lady, the art teacher. These are all things that, it's just different. He handles stuff very well. You don't hear any negative stuff about him. Okay, you had the dopey video that he sent, but for the most part, there's no negativity associated with him. He's a team player. You see him playing hurt, right? It just seemed like every week he would get up after catching one of his passes and limp to the sideline. Oh, shoot. And then he comes back 3 plays later and carries 5 Ravens into the end zone. I think he's very complete as a person, player, and everything. And it's just refreshing to see that and be able to cover that and just we get to see it firsthand.
Yeah, that dopey post-surgical video you referenced. The thing that's fascinating to me is, he's under the effects of anesthesia. Obviously, it's a moment of pure honesty, and the pure honesty that comes from him is, I want to be the greatest in the game.
Yeah.
Like if there was ever a moment that a guy would say, I talk a big game, but I'm really scared to death out there. Like, that's when it would have come out, right? Like, you knew deep in his soul that that's coming from saying, I want to be the best there is. I thought that was a great moment for him, even though I know he said he's embarrassed by it. But
it was really funny, man. I after that, it was a funny experience just watching that, man. I know it was crazy for him.
Absolutely. TD, we appreciate you taking time to come on this week with us. As always, TD joins us every week here on Robby and Rexrode at 8 o'clock. Great stuff as always, my man. Hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you guys, and definitely take care.
Absolutely.
See you, TD.
Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD, presented by Freedom Tire Guys, Nashville's premier mobile tire company, online at freedomtireguys.com. Coming up next, we'll get into a little bit of what TD had to say there about whether or not the Titans are being overrated or overhyped heading into this season. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, streaming live on YouTube, on Twitch, and on Periscope as well, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, David Beauclair, Ryan Porth here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks to Teron Davenport for joining us in the last segment. And David, it was funny. You asked him about A.J. Brown in the last segment and his presence on social media. And on cue, over the break, A.J. Brown is on social media complimenting a middle schooler for winning the spelling bee and being a good basketball player as well.
There's a real skill to keeping your social media feed positive and
Yes.
filled with positive energy and whatnot. David Price has always been really good at it, and AJ, to TD's point, AJ Brown is excellent at it. It's I'm starting to believe it's almost like athletic skill. It's one of those things you can't teach. People either have it or they don't, and AJ Brown clearly has it, and it's the kind of thing. Assuming he keeps playing the way he's been playing, he can end up being a real star, sort of like this. This franchise hasn't seen in a while, if ever. I mean, he could be a guy getting some pretty big play endorsement wise at some point.
Absolutely, and as TD said, I think AJ Brown, pretty much if you could draw it up, if you're a Titans fan the first 2 years, it's gone pretty well for AJ Brown to this point. We'll see if he can build on that heading into year 3, and he's going to have to if the Titans live up to the expectations that are now out there from some with this group, with Julio Jones coming into the fold. Obviously, a lot of national conversation about this Titans team, about this offense, and what it can be with the pieces they have in place. Division winners a year ago, an AFC title game appearance a couple of years ago. So they've been building to this point. And now with Julio Jones coming in, there are high expectations on this Titans offense, especially heading in. And some maybe not buying the hype on the Titans heading into this season. Keyshawn Johnson had some interesting comments on the Tennessee Titans and his thoughts on this group heading into this season. Here's what Keyshawn Johnson from ESPN had to say about the Tennessee Titans maybe being a little bit overrated.
I think a lot of people are putting a lot on the Tennessee Titans. They have a marginal defense, actually very marginal defense. Offensively, they rely heavily on Henry to run the football because they went out and got Julio Jones at the receiver position. I think everybody is kind of like, oh, my God, Tennessee. It's like, hold on. They're not going to all of a sudden start throwing the ball all over the lot. They're going to basically be the offense that they were a year ago. Julio Jones comes in. They're not going to just decide to shut down A.J. Brown and focus on throwing the ball to Julio Jones. So just chill out. You still have a tough a tough opponent within the division in the Indianapolis Colts. Baltimore's there in the conference. You got the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chargers are in the conference. The Browns are in the conference. The Bills, the Pats are all in the conference. So I would slow down on the hype train of the Tennessee Titans just because they acquired one of the great receivers in NFL history in Julio Jones.
So that was Keyshawn Johnson from ESPN. And look, I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of what Keyshawn Johnson had to say there. I do love how he stopped himself in mid-sentence of, they've got a good division. Oh, well, they've got a good opponent in the division, with Houston and Jacksonville being part of that mix as well. So some nice discretion there from Keyshawn. I guess the one thing I keep coming back to, David, is the defense, because it was so bad last year. But I don't know how you know what it's going to be this year. They've changed so much on it. And I think that could work out poorly. It could be bad once again. It could also be a lot better. Like I have no clue what to expect out of this defense heading in this year.
I agree. It's the big question mark. I think there's obviously going to be some growing pains that, as I've thought about it here the last couple weeks, things have been quiet, and you have a little more time to sort of sit and think and plan. And we've paid so much attention to Bud Dupree and what's he going to do for the pass rush. We've paid a lot of attention to the secondary and the fact that you've retooled the entire secondary. And I'm not sure that enough attention is being paid by myself on down the line to Danico Autry and what he can do. The defensive line is going to be different too.
Yep.
For years you've had Daquan Jones as the nose tackle, and he's been in there and a really good player, really underrated player, but he was what he was in that regard. In Danico Autry, you've got a guy who's going to move around now some, a guy who's going to play some at the nose tackle, a guy who's going to play some at over the guard, a guy who can even line up a little wider sometimes, and he'll create some opportunities for Jeffrey Simmons too. And in some ways, I almost think that Autry is sort of the most important signing, even though he's sort of getting the least play this offseason among all those defensive changes, because as we have seen repeatedly over the years in the NFL, if your defensive line can create havoc up front, you've got a chance to win games. And I think with Autry and Simmons together, there's as much opportunity to create havoc up front as this team has had in a really long time. And that that's going to be really important to me to watch the first couple weeks of the season, how they use him and what kind of impact he has on what the offense is trying to do.
I got a texter on the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. It says the defense definitely cannot be worse than it was last year. I guess that's certainly one way to view it.
I mean, when you're historically bad on third down, it's and we say that all the time. Like analytics say, for example, that there's no way Derrick Henry is going to even approach what he did last year.
Right.
Like he might have 1,400, 1,500 yards, which is a great year, and it's still going to look bad in a way in compared to last year. Well, same thing. Like analytics will tell you that there's no way the defense is going to be so miserable on third down again this coming season. So I agree with that too. It's but when you have so many new parts, the ability to work together and play the system, and is Shane Bowen going to be better as a coordinator? What did he learn last year?
Yep.
And that's harder to quantify, but equally important for that unit.
So TD threw this out there in the last segment, and it is interesting to look at this, I think, nationally, because I agree with him. I think the expectations are obviously Kansas City is at number one in the AFC, which they should be, with Patrick Mahomes and company leading the charge there. The Cleveland Browns getting a lot of love. Obviously, Buffalo getting a lot of love as well. And then there's the tier of the Titans, the Colts, the Ravens, teams like that in the mix as well. TD seemed to think that the Titans may be being a little underhyped heading into this year. What do you kind of view the Titans, the attention they're getting nationally with Julio Jones coming in? Do you think expectations are about right where they should be? Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit higher? How do you view this Titans team as we look ahead to training camp now coming up in here in a couple weeks?
I'm going to parse words here a little bit.
Okay. I'm
going to say that the Titans are overrated but not overhyped in a lot of ways. I think when I see them, I don't see a team right now that's a Super Bowl contender. I see a team that is in a two-horse race for the division. I thought before the Julio Jones trade that the Colts were clearly the favorite to win the division. The Titans were clearly number two. I think that race now at this point, you say that's a toss-up. So if you can win the division, great. You're getting a home playoff game. You're kind of where you want to be at that time of year. So I think I wouldn't say they're any better than that right now. In terms of the hype about them, I think when you get a Julio Jones and you put him in an offense with an A.J. Brown and a Derrick Henry, it's such an interesting collection of talent, and it's such a different sort of collection of talent than you see on other teams in terms of the size and the power aspect. And let's face it, power is always attractive in sports. It's why heavyweight, when there's a great heavyweight boxer, people want to see that. People want to see the knockout. The Titans look like sort of a one-punch fighter on offense where, at any time they can knock you out. So I think in terms of the hype, absolutely, you've got to talk about this, and you've got to talk about the possibilities, and you've got to imagine what can happen with this group of players. So I think in terms of the hype, that part is every bit deserved. But in terms of the expectations, I do think kind of what Keyshawn Johnson said. You've got a lot of questions about that defense right now. There's you've got an aging offensive line. It's going to be one of the oldest offensive lines in the league. Will it hold up? There's just some questions that you can't that unsettle you a little bit right now, I guess, in terms of the expectations for them.
So are we overhyping the Titans heading into the 2021 NFL season? Are expectations maybe a little too high? Let us know on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We'll get to that coming up next, and also dig a little deeper as to why David Beauclair doesn't feel like the Titans are true Super Bowl contenders. We'll get to that next as well. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. ESPN 94.9 is the home for Nashville Sounds baseball. Tonight, the Sounds take on Gwinnett, the AAA affiliate of the Atlanta Braves. The pregame show with Jeff Himm starts at 5:50, and the first pitch is at 6:05. Nashville Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by 312 Pizza Company. Also, some more games coming up this weekend. Saturday against Gwinnett, pregame at 4:50, first pitch at 5:05 on ESPN 94.9, and then on Sunday, pregame at 11:50, first pitch at 12:05. On ESPN 94.9. So a weekend full of Nashville Sounds baseball coming up that you can check out on ESPN 94.9. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, ESPN 1025 The Game. Robby Stanley, David Beauclair, Ryan Porth here with you, talking Titans and expectations heading in to this 2021 season. And David, you talked about in the last segment how you think maybe the Titans are overrated, not overhyped.
Yes.
What do you think? And you brought up not necessarily buying that the Titans are Super Bowl contenders. I think many people would say this offense certainly good enough to contend for a Super Bowl with Julio Jones, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Ryan Tannehill, and the pieces they have in place. What are your holdups to really going all in and committing to believing this Titans team is a legitimate Super Bowl threat coming out of the AFC?
Well, if you're going to make a playoff run, you've got to be able to stop people occasionally. You're going to get stopped, so you're going to have to get some stops. And right now, I think the Titans' offense can be stopped a little more often than their defense will stop people. As we discussed, this defense can't be as bad as it was last year, but I need to see it be a lot better before I'm willing to say that this is a Super Bowl contender. I need to see a pass rush. I need to see a more cohesive secondary unit, one that breaks up passes, not just gets guys to the ground after they've caught the ball. I do have concerns about the 370 touches thing with Derrick Henry, and that, in addition to coming off 2,000 yards, I mean, there's so much history to show you the effects of those sorts of things. And I agree with what Teron Davenport said in that I do think Derrick Henry is built differently, both physically and mentally, maybe than a lot of other people who have been through it. But we forget too. I mean, that playoff run in 2019, he had a ton of touches there. That in addition to what he had done in the regular season, which was a little short of 370 touches there. So he has had a lot of work the last 2 years, and how much he comes back. The injury factor concerns me. This team under Mike Vrabel has done a remarkable job in terms of replacing injured players. But what if Derrick Henry gets hurt? What if Ryan Tannehill gets hurt? Tannehill had brought a little bit of an injury history with him that hasn't resurfaced here in Tennessee. What happens there? Those are, this roster has become so top heavy that there are positions where there's depth questions, and legitimate depth questions. And what happens if you get injuries in those spots? Those these are all things that this team is going to have to overcome. Or some of them they're going to have to overcome, but before I'm convinced that they're a Super Bowl team. But I do, again, I think they're very much in the mix to win the division, which sets you up for potentially doing something in the playoffs.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. 1025. Got a texture that says, we statistically had one of the worst defenses in NFL history last year, and we still won 11 games and the division. Our offense is just as good, if not better, than it was last year. Still questions about the defense, but with the new additions this offseason, there's no way it should be worse than last year's. Should easily win 10-plus games, and if we can sweep the Colts, then for sure win the division.
Yeah.
I think sweep the Colts is a lot easier said than done. But
I mean, I agree with that 100%. This should be at least a 10-win team. The question is the defense going to be good enough to win you games in January? It wasn't last year. Historically bad as it was not good enough. Can it be good enough to win you games in January? I can't say that that's the case right now.
Matt from Camden on the text line. If Bud Dupree and Caleb Farley are both healthy and you can get the production that you're wanting out of those guys, our defense can be good enough to win a Super Bowl. What do you think about the defense? A lot of it riding on the health of Bud Dupree and Caleb Farley.
Yeah, and we talk about the secondary and all the changes there, and it's interesting because we kind of know who the players are going to be, but we don't know how they fit together. Jackrabbit Jenkins is going to be a starter playing sort of the Malcolm Butler role last year. Is Christian Fulton an outside guy who slides inside some? Is Elijah Molden the nickel guy all the time? Is Caleb Farley good enough to be an outside guy all the time? And what does that do for how you use Fulton and Molden? We know who the players are, but I'm curious if even the coaches know right now, because I think Farley is very much a question mark in terms of, is he going to be ready to go at the start of training camp, and if he is, how much can he pick up after having not played football in a while, and is it going to take him a little time to get back to his peak physical condition? There's sort of a lot of moving parts to that group that you look at it on paper and you say that could be a much better unit than it was, but you sort of have to piece it all together, and it always worries me when you kind of don't know what the ideal look is going into the season. You're never going to get your ideal look all the way through, but I think the best teams are the ones who know sort of, okay, when we're at our best, it's going to look like this, and I'm just not sure that's the case with this bunch right now.
Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texter that says, how can you say the division is a toss-up between the Titans and Colts when the Colts have Carson Wentz?
That's a good question. That's a fair question. And my answer to that is, if Carson Wentz is going to get back to anything close to what he was in 2017, it'll be with Frank Reich, who was his offensive coordinator then, who, we saw here what the marriage of an offensive coordinator and quarterback can do with Arthur Smith and Ryan Tannehill. Frank Reich's the head coach there, but he is also basically the offensive coordinator for the Colts, and he and Wentz have that sort of relationship where it's not just a football relationship. They just get each other completely. So that's another thing. That's the big question for the Colts. There's no question about that. But they have a chance, and they also have a great offensive line and a great running game of their own right that they don't need as much from their quarterback as many teams do to be able to win games. The good news for the Titans there is they've got a great running game and a quarterback who's better and proven much more than what Carson Wentz has to this point.
Well, and I think also, though, the thing to keep in mind there is the offensive line in Philadelphia last year was absolutely atrocious.
Yes.
And Carson Wentz was running for his life. Now, look, I've got as many questions about Carson Wentz as anybody. I'll believe it when I see it, when he comes back and looks anything like the 2017 version of Carson Wentz. But certainly, at least you feel like, at least if you're him, you're going to have some time to throw the ball this year, which is a step in the right direction based on what we saw in Philadelphia last year.
And it's easy for me to say, but I don't like the fact that he got scared. Because he clearly got scared, and you see that with quarterbacks. Sort of like once they experience the fear, it's kind of always there. The way David Carr eventually got shell shocked in Houston after getting pounded behind that terrible line for a while. Like he eventually got to the point where and you see it with older quarterbacks a lot of times in the league. They eventually get to the point where they just don't want to get hit, and their primary goal once they get away from center is to get that ball out of their hands. The bigger question for me is can Wentz sort of put that behind him and get back to a point where you're willing to stand in there and take some of those hits. And again, that's easy for me to say. I don't have 300-pound guys slamming into me every time. But that's sort of that's what's required of the quarterback position.
Got a texture that says, we've been saying what if for 2 years on injuries. It's time to move on from the what-ifs. Tannehill, since coming to Tennessee, has been healthy, and Henry has been healthy pretty much his entire time, even with a heavy workload. I hear that, but that's the thing about the NFL. That can change very quickly.
Yeah.
Injuries can change very quickly.
Yeah, you almost, and Mike Vrabel says it all the time, the injury rate is 100%, right? So, Derrick Henry missed one game his rookie year, and he missed one game in 2019 because they held him out with the hamstring. He could have played then. You almost feel like he's living on borrowed time a little bit. But again, if anybody's gonna break that trend, I would say Derrick Henry's going to do it, you don't at this point. You don't plan, like to that text. You don't plan on him getting hurt.
Sure,
but you have to look at it and say, if he does get hurt, that's where one of the holes in the roster is. You don't have anything comparable to Derrick Henry. That's going to change a lot of things for this team if it happens.
Nate on the text line says, I don't think expectations are too high because we don't know what this Julio experiment will be like. I expect A.J. Brown and other receivers to be more open and Henry to break some great runs from the Julio effect. Henry probably will decline from last season, but I expect him to have another great year, maybe 1,200 yards, since there are multiple offensive threats.
And I thought Teron made an interesting point, too, where, Arthur Smith, his departure and what that'll mean to Derrick Henry, where, Arthur was always going to stick with the run as long as humanly possible. And, we forget that Arthur Smith has an offensive line background, and he sort of never has lost that approach. I thought that was a really good point he made. Whereas, Todd Downing, if he gets down by 10, he might look at it and say, okay, we're down 10 in the second quarter, but we've got Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. Let's start chucking this thing around. And all of a sudden, naturally, Derrick Henry's carries and his yards and everything end up well down from what they were last year. Now, if you do start chucking it around in the second quarter, you come back to win the game, great. Everybody's happy. I'm sure Derrick Henry's happy about that too, and you found a way to lessen his workload a little bit, and particularly looking at a 17-game season, that might not be the worst way to go about things.
We'll continue the discussion on the Titans when we come back, including why one member of the Titans defense is being compared to maybe the best player in the NFL. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, David Beauclair, Ryan Porth here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Going to be joined here in about 15 minutes by former NFL tight end Vernon Davis. A nice announcement coming from Vernon Davis regarding the ESPYs coming up tomorrow. Also, a very interesting career path that former NFL tight end Vernon Davis has taken post-football playing days as well. So we'll get to that coming up with him at 9 o'clock. Right now, talking Titans, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. And David, Jeremy Fowler from ESPN has been coming out with pieces all week long on ESPN.com, ESPN Plus, talking to executives, coaches, and players, and ranking the top players at each position. And an interesting position that he came out with, I believe, a couple of days ago was the top 10 interior defensive linemen for 2021 heading into this season. And obviously, Aaron Donald at number 1, the LA Rams. You can make a pretty good argument that he might be the best overall player in the NFL. He is an absolute monster, a beast, and as one AFC scout said, I would put a space between him and all the defensive tackles or edge guys, honestly. He is by himself, and I think you will find most people that agree with that. But coming in at number 6 on the list of the top 10 interior defensive linemen for 2021.
6 with a bullet.
6 with a bullet. Jeffrey Simmons of the Tennessee Titans. Jeffrey Simmons, 23 years old. And as Jeremy Fowler points out in this piece, Jeffrey Simmons might be the least accomplished player on the list, but he is also one of the scariest. And as one NFL general manager said, no one is Aaron Donald, but he might be the closest. So what do you think of that comment, first off, that nobody's Aaron Donald in the NFL, but maybe Jeffrey Simmons is as close as it gets to that type of player?
Yeah, that's high praise for a guy right there. And Simmons, the secret is sort of out on him. There's been numerous lists of this offseason, guys who are likely to make their first Pro Bowl, and he's pretty much on every one of those I've seen. It's the guy played what, 12 games his rookie year, did it on basically one leg. It wasn't that many games, but whatever, however many he played, but played well. You could see like that was the most impressive thing to me when he came back from the knee injury, and he's still just driving offensive linemen into the backfield with remarkable frequency.
Yeah, one of his first games back, it may have even been his first game, was that Chargers game here where, they have the goal line stand, and Jeffrey Simmons is just pushing the entire line of scrimmage back.
Just blowing things up there at the end of the game. It was it was a remarkable performance, and he's a guy who wants to be good for the sake of being good. I don't get the sense from Jeffrey Simmons that he wants to be a big star. He just wants to be a good football player, and takes coaching very well, and he's a beast in there. John Robinson and Mike Vrabel said it when they drafted him that he wouldn't have been there for them at 19 had he been healthy. And that at that point it was too good to pass up. There, if they had to wait a whole year before they got him on the field, he was going to be worth it. And I think to this point that line of thinking is absolutely correct. He would have been worth whatever time it took to wait for him to get healthy, because now we see him when he's healthy, and he's not done yet. We haven't seen the best of Jeffrey Simmons yet, and what we've seen is pretty darn good.
Absolutely. And, Jeremy Fowler in this piece on ESPN.com kind of took a deep dive analytically and says opponents double-team Jeffrey Simmons on 190 pass rush attempts. That's higher than every interior rusher aside from Aaron Donald and Grady Jarrett. Simmons led all players in the top 10 on this list in interior line run stop win rate at 39.8%. The one thing that I question about Jeffrey Simmons and wonder if we're going to start to see a step in this area this year is the pass rush and the production there. He had 3 sacks a year ago, and I get it. It's not like he's coming in off the edge, so you don't think of Jeffrey Simmons as you would Bud Dupree or somebody like that. And I totally understand that, but I still think there's another level that he can get to from a pass rush standpoint, and I do wonder if having Bud Dupree on the edge, having Danico Autry alongside you on the line of scrimmage as well, if we don't see that help him from a pass rush production standpoint tangibly this year on the field.
Well, you said it right there. The number of times that he faced double teams in the pass rush. If you're getting anything from your edge guys, teams can't do that to you.
Yep.
And from an interior lineman standpoint, pass rush is not always getting sacked. We saw Albert Haynesworth in 2008 didn't put a, he didn't have 15 sacks or whatever it was, but he was so disruptive in the pass game that 3 members of the starting secondary ended up in the Pro Bowl, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like that's and Jeffrey Simmons is very much capable of that sort of performance, but he's going to have some help from the other guys on the defense so that offenses can't sort of eliminate him as a factor in the pass rush.
Absolutely. And, you brought it up earlier, and I think you're right, talking about as you reflect, as you kind of look ahead to what the season could be like for the Titans, maybe a guy we're not talking about enough is Danico Autry, because I think him being alongside Jeffrey Simmons on the line of scrimmage is going to be a major benefit to him. I mean, obviously, Bud Dupree, he's getting paid a lot of money to come in and affect the quarterback, and we'll see whether or not he's healthy enough to go to begin the season. I know he's put out some workout videos, and he's been moving around. He looks pretty good. So there's a difference between that and being on the field and having the bend and having to get around an offensive tackle out there. But we'll see what happens with him. But I do think Autry, he had 7 sacks last year. I think he could be a big help.
That's a good number from an interior lineman, and that's what, like, if you get 12 sacks combined, say from Simmons and Autry, that would be a big number to me, like 7 and 5 or whatever. But that would be a notable number to where you're not having to blitz a whole as much as maybe you have in the past, and the trickle down effect of getting that sort of play up front is huge, and I think it goes to the fact that you need to force those offensive lines to spread out and defend the edges much more so than they had to last year. If you can do that we could really see some different sort of performance from Jeffrey Simmons this year.
Taking your thoughts on the Titans on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Ben texting in, Ryan Tannehill in the playoffs is closer to Super Bowl Rex Grossman than he is Super Bowl Joe Flacco.
There is that too. That is a big question. That
I don't know that I would go Super Bowl Rex.
Grossman. I wouldn't go Rex Grossman, but
Ben is a hater.
Ben does not like him some Ryan Tannehill.
But Tannehill needs to show more in the playoffs than he's shown for the last couple years. There's no question.
Super Bowl Rex Grossman.
That's hard.
Ryan Tannehill's been pretty good for the most part. Look, the playoffs, and I think especially this last game against Baltimore, you need to be better. I don't think there's any question about that. And in order for them, I still believe, as great as Derrick Henry is, like in order for the Titans to be that Super Bowl contender that we're talking about, you're going to need performances that reflect that in the playoffs from Ryan Tannehill. Like, he's going to have to go win them a game at some point in the playoffs.
Yes.
And we've not seen him do that yet. I think the stats have been a little misleading in the playoffs from Tannehill. Like, I think back to the first Baltimore game on the road where the Titans pull off the upset. You look at the stats, nothing's going to jump off the page at you at Ryan Tannehill. I thought he played well in that game. I thought he did everything you needed him to do. You just had your running back running for 200 yards in that game.
But in the Kansas City game, there were a couple throws that were sort of bad throws that you didn't see during the regular season. I thought the same thing with Baltimore. I thought he had opportunities to make throws against Baltimore last year that the kind of throws we've seen him make in the regular season that he didn't make in that game. It's sort of like playing pinochle, and all of a sudden you run out of your trump card. You're just lacking something at trying to get it to the finish line. And
although it could help this year when instead of maybe on that last play, you've got Julio Jones to throw the ball to instead of Khalif Raymond.
Yeah, there
maybe a little bit of a difference.
That might be, or Josh Reynolds even.
Yeah.
It's
no disrespect to Khalif Raymond, who's a really good guy.
Yeah,
but a little bit of a difference there.
That's exactly right. So but in fairness to Tannehill too, the guy had never been in a playoff game in 8 years or 7 years, whatever it was, in Miami. So now he has a couple years of playoff experience. Maybe that's what it takes for him. Maybe he needs to understand that moment a little more than he did. And maybe this will be his year in the postseason.
Coming up next, we'll be joined by former NFL tight end Vernon Davis, Super Bowl champion Vernon Davis as well. The ESPY's coming up tomorrow night. Vernon Davis is going to be a part of that. We'll get to that and an interesting career path that he's taken following his football playing days. All that and more coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com. You're on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, David Beauclair in for Joe today. Joe on vacation. David will be back on Monday as well. So looking forward to that coming up on Monday. Joe will be back next week. Ryan Porth here with you today as well on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Taking your thoughts all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We've got what I guess could be our last edition of Weekend Winners coming up at 9:30 before Pigskin Pick'em happens. That depends on what happens in the NBA Finals coming up, I guess. So potentially our last edition of Weekend Winners coming up at 9:30.
You don't want to pick baseball games all the time?
I can't say that I do. Can't say that we're going to go down that route. And we are significantly
dog days, baseball games. Yeah,
we are significantly behind Joe Rexrode at this point in the competition.
Is that right?
Oh, big time, man. He would have to go probably 0 for his next 30.
Okay.
I don't anticipate that happening.
Probably not.
Joe has 30 games over 500 in the against the spread pick. It's pretty good.
It's not bad.
He's done a pretty good job so far at this point. So looking forward to that coming up at 9:30. Right now, though, we are pleased to go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in former NFL tight end Vernon Davis, who also has some exciting news coming up this weekend. Vernon, thanks so much for taking time to join us. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. No problem.
So, Vernon, the ESPYs are coming up tomorrow night, and you are serving as the voice of the ESPYs. The first time in the ESPYs history that they're having an athlete to be the voice of the show. How did this come about? How did you get involved with this? And what's your excitement level being involved with the ESPYs coming up tomorrow night?
You know what? I think it's a great opportunity. I'm very, very grateful for it, especially since an athlete has never done it. Well, ex-athlete, I should say. But it's just like one of those things. Like I want to say law of attraction, and just over the years, just how they say when you meet people, make sure you treat them the way you want to be treated, right? And it's an old friend of mine that I met in the past, happens to work for the ESPYs, and we crossed paths years ago, and my name came up, and it just worked out. It happened to work. So, like I said, it's an honor, grateful, and I look forward for the opportunity.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing it. And Vernon, obviously a lot of us here locally, we remember your playing days in the NFL, and just what a great player you were. But you've taken an interesting career path post-retirement here from the NFL and gotten into acting. Started a production company of your own as well, starring in a film with Bruce Willis coming up as well. That's coming up called Day to Die. What kind of got you into acting? When did you know that was something that you wanted to do, and how did this all come about post your football playing days?
Yeah, I've always been intrigued with acting. When I was in San Francisco, I took a class at the Shelton Theater of Art. So I would leave practice, go to class for 2 months, and it was an improv class, and I fell in love with it. After that, I was like, hey, I have to do this. I love it. It's a great feeling. I can express myself in many different ways. So after as I was playing my last couple of years, I said I'm gonna come up with a plan to come up with my own production company, and learn by doing a movie, an independent film on my own, so I can learn the ropes. So after that, I just kept pursuing it, taking auditions, and just immersing myself in the world of the creative of this craft. So that's how it all started.
Vernon, I'm curious. Back to the ESPYs for a second. What is that night like for the athletes? I mean, do they care about winning the awards? Is it just a nice night to get together and visit with people from other sports that you admire? Is it a big deal to them? Is it not? What, from an athlete's perspective, give us a little view of that night.
Yeah, it's a great. You look forward to going to the ESPYs. You look forward to seeing the different players from basketball to golf, you name it. And you're excited. Yeah, you're excited for the award. Yeah, I mean, you want to win it because it's not often you can wake up as an athlete and receive an ESPYs, an ESPY award. So I think it's pretty exciting. I mean, I remember my first time there, and I was with Patrick Willis, and we accepted an award on behalf of the team for the team. So I just remember sitting there with Patrick, looking at him and saying, "Hey, man, we're about to go up on stage. This is going to be great." We had a few words. And we also had an opportunity to bring up a wish kid with us, so that was pretty cool. But you look forward to it in general, just like to accepting the award, to seeing different people, and just having a good time. The after parties as well. It's always a good time.
So Vernon, as you look ahead to kind of your next career now, getting into acting, what are your goals going with this? I mean, we've seen a lot of former athletes kind of dive into the acting field, and I know you've brought up The Rock a few times as somebody who you admire and that you look up to. What's kind of your goal, taking this next step and moving into acting as your next career outside of playing football?
Yeah, my goal is to just have fun and just do something that I love doing. I try to talk to the younger generation, younger kids about like just doing things that you really love, that you're really passionate about. Don't just settle. And that's my plan, to do it as long as I possibly can and to have fun with it. Because if you're enjoying it and you're having fun, everything else is gonna come with it. So just having fun and enjoying it. That's all.
Vernon, looking back a little bit on your playing days, you're kind of known here in Nashville as the guy who kept Delaney Walker down when he was there in San Francisco. When you saw the success Delaney had here, did that surprise you because of the difference in the numbers he put up here or there? Or did you know he had that kind of ability when you were playing with him?
No, I always knew Delaney was talented. From the time we walked in back in 2006, I knew he was fast. I mean, he came in as a wide receiver, but they moved him to tight end. And he gained that weight and kept his speed. So I was like, this guy's talented. He can catch natural ability. to track the ball. He just had all the tangibles that you look for in an elite tight end. So it didn't surprise me when I saw him putting up those numbers and playing the way he did in Tennessee. But I'm happy for him. I'm glad he was able to have that kind of success. It was going to happen eventually because of who he was and how he approached the game. He was a real pro.
Former NFL tight end and voice of the 2021 ESPYs, Vernon Davis, on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And Vernon, it's interesting. A big story this week has been name, image, and likeness coming into effect at college football, and now these players have the opportunity to get paid at the college level via endorsements and all of these different things, and they can go and be an actor while they're playing football if they really wanted to with the new laws coming into effect. What do you think of all this? What do you think of these opportunities for players now in today's college game to be paid for the first time legally here in the history of college sports?
You know what? I'm a bit jealous because I wish they had that when I was playing ball because I couldn't even pay some of my bills in college. I wish. But no, I think it's great for them. I think it's awesome because what it does is it gives them the comfortability to be able to go into the game professionally as once they get drafted or walk on as going as a free agent. Not a free agent, but just walk on. Or however they get to the NFL. I think it just gives them just that insight on what it feels like to be able to have a deal like that. It's like an endorsement deal or what have you. But I think it's a great opportunity. Not only that, but for them to be able to make money the right way while they're playing ball. It's just great to be able to have that. And then brands could really utilize these guys and be with them for a long term. I think it's awesome.
Now, Vernon, before we let you go, I do have to ask you this question. You were on Dancing with the Stars in 2020. What's more difficult, going across the middle and catching the ball over the top of a middle linebacker, or finding out how to nail that routine in Dancing with the Stars? What was that experience like for you?
I think it's probably what I'm going to say is learning Paso Doble and Foxtrotting was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. I mean, because you got to think you got to get this routine down in 3 to 4 days. So that was extremely hard, man. But it was also a great opportunity, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Reminding everyone, Vernon Davis is the voice of the ESPYs this weekend. And Vernon, what is the voice? I mean, are you the guy coming in and out of commercials? Or are you reading a script? Are you going to get to improv it all? Sort of give us a quick rundown of what your night's going to be like.
Yeah, so I'll be behind the scenes, and whenever you hear a voice, it'll be my voice. Like you said, it's the first time they had an athlete do it. But yeah, it's a script, pages. Some of it's pre-recorded, and some of it's live. So it's a mix of both. But whenever you hear that voice, like coming to you live from the rooftop, this is the ESPYs, that kind of stuff. So I'm mentioning names like Stephen Carey. It's just everything you hear that's not from the host. So whenever the host isn't talking and you hear a voice, when you're waiting or just someone's coming out, that'll be my voice.
Is there a host voice? Like, is it your regular speaking voice, or do you have a actual? Like, can you give us a preview of how it's going to sound?
Yeah, coming to you live. This is Vernon Davis. No, I'm joking. No, that's not my voice. No, that's the late night soul voice.
Oh, that was awesome.
No, it's just a regular voice. Hey, this is very. What can I say? I'll read this. This is the ESPYs, and I'm Vernon Davis, the voice of the night, and just something like that. I don't want to give you. I don't want to get into the meat and potatoes of what I'm going to say. I want it to be a surprise.
That's right. Exactly. You got to leave the people in suspense. Vernon, we appreciate so much you taking time to join us here on the show this morning. Very much looking forward to you as the voice of the ESPYs, and great success. But best of luck to you as you move forward here with your acting career as well.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Former NFL tight end Vernon Davis, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. That's awesome. Going from being a pretty high-level tight end in the NFL, now the voice of the ESPYs, the first time an athlete doing that, to acting in movies, coming out with a movie with Bruce Willis coming up as well.
This is. It occurs to me this is sort of an underrated thing right now. It used to be, way back in the day, athletes didn't make enough money. They all had to have off-season jobs, right? And then post-playing careers, selling insurance or whatever they were doing. Then you sort of went into this period where the idea was you make enough money that you don't have to work after you're done playing. Right. And now we're seeing, we're seeing Eddie George and his multifaceted career, and all these guys are sort of, they're all sort of trying to using their careers to set themselves up for something bigger or different or interesting coming next, and this is a really good example of that. I find this is it occurs to me this is an interesting trend in the pro sports world right now.
Coming up next, we'll get back into the NBA Finals from last night. Phoenix Suns with a statement once again. Is this thing over? Can Milwaukee come back and hang on? Also, a big night last night for Nashville SC as well. While there's one thing about this season so far for Nashville SC that's driving me nuts. We'll get to that coming up next. Right now, though, got to tell you about my friends at the FanDuel Sportsbook, and the NBA Finals, speaking of, are finally here, and FanDuel Sportsbook has a championship offer that you don't want to miss, because during the finals, new users get 30-1 odds on either team, the Bucks or the Suns, to win their next game. That means you can win $150 on a $5 bet. Right now, the Suns up 2-0. Maybe the Bucks can get back in it going back home to Wisconsin. There are even more ways to win on FanDuel during the NBA Finals. And when you do win, getting your money is a layup. You'll get paid in as little as 24 hours, plus the app, very, very easy to use. So just sign up today with promo code ROB to bet the NBA Finals with 30-1 odds. Once again, that promo code is ROB to unlock 30-1 odds on either team to win their next game exclusively on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. You must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. New users only. Must wager in designated offer market. A $10 first deposit required. $150 max bonus. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. Nashville SC fans, join ESPN 94.9 this Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. for NSC Backstage, featuring Nashville SC players and coaches. Special guest this Monday night will be Nashville SC General Manager Mike Jacobs. You can watch the show online as well via 102.5 The Game's Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and theGameNashville.com. NSC Backstage brought to you by Camarena Tequila, the official tequila of Nashville SC. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on YouTube, on Twitch, and on Periscope as well. And speaking of Nashville SC, David Beauclair.
Yes.
A 2-2 draw last night for Nashville SC against Atlanta United. Some goals taken off the board. Nashville SC, the better team throughout the game. But another draw for Nashville SC. They have played 7 games this year. They are 4-1-7. So 7 draws.
12 games, 7 draws.
7 draws.
Unbeaten at home, though.
Unbeaten at home.
They
continuing to collect points.
Are they sure they want to move to the fairgrounds? Nissan Stadium's, been a pretty good little place for them so far.
And about 23,000 in attendance last night. Now, look, I will readily admit, I am new to soccer. I have been around Nashville SC for a while now. I've been around them and watched them grow even before the USL days. So there's some investment level here. I love me some Nashville SC. I'm glad to see that this city is becoming more and more of a soccer market. I'm excited about the World Cup qualifying match coming up on September the 5th. I'm excited about the possibility of the World Cup as a whole, maybe coming in 2026 here for a few matches. But I will say, the one thing about soccer that I've not really been able to wrap my mind around yet and really accept is the frequency in which draws happen. I mean, we're talking 7 draws in 12 games. 7 games without a winner or a loser. Beauclair, I've got to rewire my way of thinking because the sports that I have loved my whole life, to think about that drives me nuts. And before I get the text and the tweets, I know, look, ties can happen in the NFL. We've seen them happen. They are very rare, but we've seen them happen. Ties used to be able to happen in the NHL as well, and then they fixed it. And you can argue whether or not the shootout's a good thing or a bad thing. I happen to not really mind the shootout all that much. I know some people hate it, but it's just one of those things where I've not been able to really wrap my mind around the frequency of how often draws happen at the MLS level.
I will say this, though. I like the fact that the MLS awards 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw. I do like that. I would have preferred the NHL had done that, as a couple years ago, as opposed to going to the 3-on-3 or even the 4-on-4. If they had just played a 5-minute overtime but awarded 2 extra points instead of 1, I think that would have served the game well. There is real incentive to not tie, but soccer is just that kind of game. It's one of the realities. One of the things that is making soccer, that is fueling soccer's rise in this country right now, is that the U.S. has finally stopped trying to reinvent soccer to its own purposes.
Yep.
I mean, we hear soccer broadcasts on TV with British announcers, and it sounds really authentic, and it sounds different than American sports broadcasts. There's no one's really trying to play an American version of the game. It's this is what works throughout the world. It works here too. So part of what international soccer is, part of the game all across the world is ties. And so you have to, if you're going to get on board with this, you have to embrace the fact that this is another thing that makes it different from American sports, and that that being part of its appeal, accept it and realize this is what you're dealing with here, and embrace the difference.
Joe on Twitter told me, and I quote, "You got to get over it. Draws are a part of soccer. As you watch more, you learn there are some good draws and some bad ones.
That's true.
Some feel almost as good as a win, and others feel just like a loss." Now, that is something that fundamentally I cannot understand. I guess I've got to work my way around. But Joe also said, I was just like you in 2013 when I started watching. I didn't like a lot of things about the game. But the more I watched, the more I understood it, at least. Some of the things I still can't stand, diving being one.
Ugh.
But it's a great game, and it gets better the more you watch. I've enjoyed watching soccer. It's just the ties I can't do.
To his point, last night's tie for Nashville SC certainly felt like a loss.
Felt like a bad one. Yeah. Well, and Gary Smith basically said as much after the game, leaving points on the table. We talked to Tony Husband before the game yesterday about how Atlanta's missing a lot of guys. It's probably a game you need to win. Now, granted, Nashville SC missing some players as well due to international competition, and they missed Walker Zimmerman last night. I don't think there's any question about that, but it did feel like Nashville SC left some points on the table last night.
I didn't watch the match. I don't know. I sort of followed along a little bit on social media. I was kind of aware what was going on, but I have a long history with soccer.
You do?
I do. I go way back to the early '90s. I was a correspondent for Soccer America. Was covering the Dallas Sidekicks for a couple newspapers in Dallas back in the day. Of course, that was indoor soccer, but did some stuff with the national team back then. It's and I guess that's part of the appeal of soccer too. Is it hasn't changed a whole lot. All sports evolve to a certain degree, but there is sort of a timeless nature to soccer that sort of was baseball's appeal for a long time, and suddenly, as analytics have taken over baseball, suddenly baseball is a completely different game than we knew for most of our lifetimes. Soccer hasn't changed a whole lot, and ties have always been there, and I don't know that there's a real hue and cry to change that.
Other than me, I think I'm the lone voice in the wilderness.
I mean, obviously, when you get into the right now the Euros are going on, it can't have ties in the knockout round.
Right.
You've got to settle it, and that becomes highly dramatic in those moments. But it's interesting that soccer is willing to let everybody sort of come away saying, okay, could have been better, could have been worse. We'll take it and move on.
Fourth, you look like you had something to say, but then you didn't.
So. Well, I was going to weigh in that betting on soccer is frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
I can imagine.
Because in these tournaments, like Euro, it's all about 90 minutes. Yeah. Are they going to win in 90 minutes, or are they going to advance?
Yeah. That's why you got to be good.
Yep.
We'll get to that more coming up in Weekend Winners here in just a second.
Porth, do we need to get you the hotline number? You
might.
You developing an issue over there?
You don't need to get it to me. It's 1-800-889-9789. I mean,
that's for sure. Got more of that coming up.
Luckily, I haven't called that number yet.
You have not. That's good.
Yet.
Yet is the key word.
I had the greatest lesson in how not to get too involved in sports gambling back in about January.
Oh yeah.
I kick around a couple of bucks here and there on DraftKings just for kicks every now and then, and I hadn't made a bet in probably 3 weeks, and I get an email one day saying, we understand that our app was not functioning for a while Saturday. We apologize. Of course, I had no idea, right? And they said, but to make it up to you, we're giving everybody a free $50 bet. Just use it sometime the next week. For $50, all right, this will be fun, right? So a couple days later, SMU, my alma mater, playing a basketball game against Tulsa.
Highly anticipated matchup.
SMU's a 2.5-point favorite. I thought, okay, this will be fun. I'm putting my $50 down on SMU. 12 minutes to go. The Ponies are up by 17, and they won by 2. I think it was. It was 1 or 2. They won by 1 or 2. Whatever. I lost, and I just thought. I really did. I sat back. I thought to myself, if that had been real money, I'd have been losing my mind right now, and there's no better little reminder to me to, don't you dare think you're smart enough to do this for real. Just
17-point lead?
17-point lead with 12 minutes to go. And failed to cover a 2.5-point spread.
That's a bad beat.
That's a bad beat.
But it's not. It's a bad free beat.
Right. That's what I say. That's what I say. But I thought at some point, just imagine, we all know, you bet enough, you win a couple times in a row, you start to think you're smart.
Yep.
I now that I will forever have that lodged right in the front of my brain. You are not smart enough to beat the system. The bookies have been around forever for a reason.
Yeah.
They win.
You win a couple times, and you put 100 on Toronto to beat Ottawa, and then
that's tough one for you. That's a constant theme for you throughout the season.
I literally to your point, David, I literally put a reminder in my phone. There was a Toronto-Ottawa game late in the regular season where I put a reminder in my phone, do not bet on the Leafs Sens tonight. Because every single time I bet on Toronto-Ottawa this season, Ottawa would crush my hopes and dreams and do it in just unbelievable fashion.
The final seconds.
Ottawa.
Ottawa and SMU.
Yes.
Crushing dreams everywhere.
The Orioles are becoming my Ottawa Senators of baseball.
Apparently so. Speaking of that, we've got weekend winners coming up next. We've got some winners to throw your way, a standings update as well. The competition getting pretty heated between Porth and myself. There's some distance between Joe Rexrode and the rest of us. We'll get to all that coming up next. Taking your thoughts as well on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
Time to pick some winners. We hope. Robby and Rexrode have weekend winners for you. Now
On ESPN
1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
And it is time, that time of the week, for weekend winners here on Robby and Rexrode. We've got a lot of action coming up this weekend in the world of sports, and we've got some winners to throw your way. We'll start with a very quick standings update. And Ryan Porth, I got to tell you, was not a great weekend really for any of us last week in this competition. You were gone, so Elijah Campbell in the fold making your picks. Joe Rexrode doesn't have 35 NBA games to rely on, so had to go outside the box and maybe pick a little other sports like baseball. Didn't go so well for Joe Rexrode.
Not Aussie rules football?
Was not, well, I did have an Aussie rules football pick last week.
And you lost.
Yeah, I'm 0 for 2.
Good job.
May or may not go back to the well. The Gold Coast has let me down. West Coast has let me down. So we'll see what happens on that front in the Australian Rules Football League.
Good luck to you.
The standings update is this. Joe Rexrode 2-4 last week with no lock. So Rexrode sits at 72-42 overall, 88 points, 16-3 on his locks. So been almost automatic with his locks. Did not happen for Rexrode last week. Ryan Porth, last week selected by Elijah Campbell, 3-3 with your lock last week, so 4 points available to you, bringing your overall record to 56-56, a total of 66 points, 10-9 on your locks. Robbie Stanley, 2-4 last week with the lock, 52-62 overall, 62 points, 10-9 on the lock. So, Porth, as we sit going into this week, there is a 4-point difference between you and I for second place in this competition, and you are currently in second place, 22 points behind Rexrode. So he's in pretty good shape.
A lot of ground to make up.
A lot of ground to make up here in Weekend Winners. And David Beauclair, you're in the mix today. So we start with Game 3 coming up of the NBA Finals. The Suns with a 2-0 series lead, taking on the Milwaukee Bucks. It's the third time I've called them Milwaukee Bucks. I really want them to be the Milwaukee Bucks. My goodness. I can't believe I continue to do this. The Milwaukee Bucks playing at home in Game 3 coming up on Sunday night. The Bucks -4 in this game. David Beauclair, we begin with you. Suns-Bucks Game 3. Bucks -4 in the game. Who you got?
Suns winning outright.
Whoa. Suns not only with the +4, winning outright in the game.
Outright.
Go up 3-0
This series
in the series.
is done.
So you say, is you calling a sweep?
Sure. Yeah.
Is there a conviction in there?
Well, given that I haven't watched a moment of games 1 or 2, it's tough to have a lot of conviction. But
Suns have looked pretty good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I've read about them. I've read about the games.
Ryan Porth, the Bucks, the Milwaukee Bucks, -4 at home coming up in Game 3 on Sunday, which, by the way, you can hear on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
That's right.
Who are you taking, Suns or Bucks?
Give me the Butts.
The Butts -4.
The Butts -4.
Any analysis you'd like to provide to that? Any reasoning?
They are back home. They've been good at home.
Okay.
In the playoffs.
Well said. This is a great job by Ryan Porth.
The Butts have been good at home this postseason.
Really,
it's not a free beat, though. Let's be clear about that.
It is not a free beat here on the program. Really high maturity level we continue to have here on Weekend Winners. David Beauclair, we are sorry to expose you to this type of thing that happens seemingly a daily basis here on the show.
Lay down with a pig, you're going to roll in the mud eventually.
That's right.
Know?
I will also take the Milwaukee Bucks coming up in Game 3. The Bucks -4. I think they get it done. Giannis, he plays well at home. Chris Middleton remembers how to shoot a basketball. And at the end of the day, that's enough. I said it in Call Your Shot Friday, so I've got to stick with it. I think the Bucks are going to even this thing up. It'll be 2-2 heading back to Phoenix for Game 5, and I think the Bucks roll in Game 3. So give me the Bucks -4. Ryan Porth, are you okay to continue this segment of Weekend Winners?
Sure.
Okay. The final of the Euros coming up this weekend. England with a big win a couple of days ago that sent the country into a frenzy. They'll take on Italy, and we're picking this game straight up for the Euro Finals. Who wins between England and Italy? Ryan Porth, we begin with you.
Italy.
Really? All right.
I'm going with Italy, mostly because this would be so England with their history of soccer tournaments.
That's true.
To have the Euro at Wembley and not win.
Yeah.
So give me Italy.
They do kind of have the a little bit of a Toronto Maple Leafs feel to them.
They do.
Where they can screw things up at a moment's notice.
Absolutely.
So we'll see, though. A good call by Ryan Porth for Italy. David Beauclair, England or Italy on the money line coming up in the Euro final. Who you taking?
I agree, and not every national team, not every country could go into England and win that game, but I think Italy, particularly this particular bunch, is just going to revel in that. Plus, they owe me.
They do.
The Azzurri, I fell in love with the Azzurri for no reason in particular back in '92 when the World Cup was here. And Roberto Baggio was the star of that team and missed a penalty kick in the, I don't even remember if it was a semifinal or the final, but I can still see the photo of Baggio with his head down after missing that kick, and so
A little bit of redemption.
This is my time to. This is their time to make it up for me. Make it up to me, and I will rejoice in Italy's victory, even though I don't have a drop of Italian blood in me.
Give me England in this matchup. England will win at home, and the drinks will be flowing all around London. Okay. I think England gets it done against Italy. So that brings us to the individual portion of the selection of weekend winners. Ryan Porth, would you like to begin? Your first individual selection is what or whom?
I'm going back to the butts.
Okay.
Giannis will be the top point scorer in the game.
What?
At -1, it's -120. That is within our rules.
The top point scorer in the game?
Yes, you can bet on that. Did you
mean
not know
for
this?
I knew that. Oh, you mean for the whole game? I thought you meant for the Bucks.
No.
I was like, well, yeah. Okay. I guess
for the whole game.
I guess we'll allow
We're going to
that.
find out
Minus
after
120.
We're going to find out after the finals that knee's really more messed up than people realize.
I think so too.
I don't trust him. I don't trust him to be good like 2 or 3 games in a row right now. I don't think he's got it in him.
By the way, Keith on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says Porth likes the butts and he cannot lie. And with that, Ryan Porth is done for the remainder of the
Fear the butts.
Fear the butts. All right, we'll allow that one to take place. David Beauclair, your first individual selection.
I said during Call Your Shot Friday that Shohei Ohtani would not get out of the first round of the Home Run Derby. I'm calling Pete Alonso as your winner.
Pete Alonso.
He will become the 4th multi-time champion.
I like it.
Joining Ken Griffey Jr., Jonas Cespedes, and Prince Fielder.
I think he'd be the 3rd back-to-back.
That'd be awesome.
Because Alonso won in 19 the last time they did this.
I like it.
That's right. Yes.
Little home run derby
Griffey
action.
won it back-to-back. Cespedes won it back-to-back.
Alonso is built for this format.
It's not Ohtani's jam. I'm thinking this is Alonso's jam. Exactly right.
Well, and he's taking batting practice, too. So that also helps in this competition. I have gone to the whale of Australian League football the last couple of weeks, and it's not worked out well. I'm 0 for 2 for Australian rules football, and that's going to have to change, and it's going to change this time around.
Okay.
I've the coasts, all the coast teams in the Australian rules football league, they've let me down.
You're going inland?
So I'm going inland. I'm going to the mighty matchup of Hawthorne versus Fremantle. I believe that's how you say it.
I believe that's correct. Yes.
Give me Fremantle in this matchup on the money line. Fremantle.
You don't even know
Hawthorne.
how to say them, and you're picking them.
Well, this is going to be the winner.
Okay.
We're going a little bit more inland in Australia. I've tried to take down the big cities. Tried to take down Sydney last week. It didn't go well. They got beat by 96, and I'm not making that up.
By 96?
They got beat by 96 points. It was unbelievable.
How do you get beat by 96?
I can't explain it to you, but they got beat by 96.
That's a tremendous loss.
It was it was a loss of biblical proportions last week.
I hope that's not considered a close game in Aussie rules football.
It is not. It was
okay.
The word I saw described it was demolition. So that's what I'm going with.
So they didn't beat the spread there?
No, I'm going to say no. So give me Fremantle in the matchup, the highly anticipated matchup between Hawthorne and Fremantle. And the final round of individual selections, I'll begin with my lock of the week. Give me the Dodgers, -1.5 against the Diamondbacks. As Porth so eloquently put earlier this week, Diamondbacks went through a stretch where they couldn't win a game. And I think that stretch continues. Give me the Dodgers -1.5 and make it my lock. David Beauclair, your final pick of the individual selection.
This is my lock as well.
Okay.
At UFC 264.
Oh, yeah.
Dustin Poirier does it to Conor McGregor again.
Yes. Guaranteed. Poirier taking down McGregor.
McGregor's become too much of a celebrity in that sport.
He's doing a lot of talking.
When you've got too much outside interest and everything, it's
hard to lose the grind, man. You can't lose it.
You can't lose it. It's real inside that cage, and I think McGregor's life has gone beyond that cage. Can't get it back. Dustin Poirier.
Dustin Poirier is going to whip him. That's the lock for David Beauclair. Ryan Porth, your final selection in this edition of Weekend Winners.
I forgot to make Giannis being the top point scorer my lock. So that is my lock. All right.
Have you done this before? Okay.
Huh?
Have you done this competition before?
It's been a while.
Okay, all right.
I've taken 2 vacations in like the last 3 weeks. So
all right, continue.
It's a homer pick, but I feel good about it. Going with the Cincinnati Reds money line tonight in Milwaukee.
Oh.
The Reds bullpen struck yet again last night.
Yes, it did.
And I don't like how the pitching matchups are going for Cincinnati against Milwaukee this weekend.
Yeah.
So I think tonight with Wade Miley on the mound, the Reds get it done and at least get one of these big games against the Brewers tonight.
So you got a lot of confidence in Wade Miley.
The dude threw a no-hitter earlier this year.
I know. I'm just saying you got a lot of confidence.
No hitters are nothing this year, though.
Well, he's been consistent.
Everybody's thrown a no-hitter this year.
Did he spider tack up the baseball? What's it been like
I'm
since then?
sure he's spider tacked it and rosined it and sunscreened it. All of it.
Well, I can't do that anymore. So watch out, Wade Miley.
But he pitched well last time out.
Going to be an offensive explosion tonight in what was once Miller Park, and now the name escapes me in Milwaukee. So there you go.
Some sort of insurance field.
There you go. Bring back Miller Park.
Brewers have gotten good.
Oh, yeah, they have. It's all, you got to slide in left field. Good enough for me. That is today's edition of Weekend Winners here on Robby and Rexrode. Gentlemen, good luck. We wish you the best of luck
and
over
to
the
you,
weekend.
sir.
When we come back, we will get into the NBA Finals, and also a lot of local attention going to be in the MLB Draft coming up this weekend as well. What do we think is going to be the future for Leiter and Rocker coming out of Vanderbilt? Where do they land in the draft? What sort of pitchers do they forecast to be at the MLB level? We'll get to all that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
From the Fox 17 News Code Red Weather Center.
I'm Fox 17 News Code Red meteorologist Dan Guthrie. Middle portion of the day going to be the drier portion of the day. This afternoon, storms will roll back up from the south, and we'll be talking about another warm and muggy day, high 90 degrees.
This weather report brought to you by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical.
Call the Happy Face Truck today.
Betting fans, want great up-to-the-minute information to wager your next bet? Tune in for Moneyline every Friday night at 6 p.m. on 102.5 The Game. Chase McCabe and Ryan Porth will give you an hour of betting information. Brought to you by Twin Spires. Download their betting app today. It's finally that time. Social Furniture's blowout 4th of July sale. You don't want to miss it before it's gone. Social Furniture is lighting you up with sofas, sectionals, dining rooms, and mattress sets for the whole family. Hurry up and get your new furniture before it disappears. Social Furniture offers same-day delivery and free curbside pickups. Buy today with no money down and no interest. Visit Social Furniture in West Nashville at 5412 Charlotte Avenue. Forget the big box store. Support local. Support social.
Welcome back in. Final segment of the day here on Robby and Rexrode, ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, David Beauclair, Ryan Porth here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Game 2 last night between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns in the NBA Finals. The Suns get a 118-108 win. Devin Booker, a big night last night, 31 points for Devin Booker. Bridges added another 27, and then Chris Paul, 23 points, 8 assists. To round it out last night for the Phoenix Suns. They take a 2-0 series lead. And, David, as you mentioned earlier, and you're right, I mean, you look back through the history of the NBA, typically, I mean, there's some ascension involved, right? And it's changed a little bit. Like, even with, LeBron and the Heat, they got to the finals the first year, but they lost the first year, and then they won the next two after that. There's typically a building process that takes place. Suns haven't been in the playoffs since 2010, and now here they sit 2 wins away from an NBA title.
Yeah, I mean, you think of the Pistons having to get past the Sixers and particularly the Celtics. You think of the Bulls having to overcome the Pistons before they could finally win it. I mean, the NBA, you're supposed to pay your dues.
Yeah.
You're supposed to suffer a couple of years in order to climb that mountain. But the Suns just flat out of nowhere, here they come, and it seems like they've got all the mojo on their side right now. So, like I say, I haven't watched the games. I've been reading about them, so I have a sense of what's going on. But I think Giannis is hurt, and I think they, it's a tall order for them to win 4 out of these last 5 now.
Yeah,
with a guy who's gutting it out there.
And I picked him to win in 7. I'm not feeling great about it right now. This we'll have to see what happens on that front. But I said coming into the series from Milwaukee, like the key is going to be how well does Chris Middleton shoot?
Yeah.
And so far, not very well. He has 11 points last night, 5 of 16 from the field. Drew Holiday, 7 of 21 from the field last night. Like when your 2 other best players outside of Giannis, when they're both shooting below 33% from the field, I mean, you're digging yourself in a hole at that point that's going to be too difficult to come out of. Bobby Portis only 2 points off the bench last night, so not a good night offensively from an efficiency standpoint from Milwaukee. And, Giannis battling through the injury that he is, 42 last night. We'll see if his body can hold up as they go back home to Milwaukee for Game 3, but
yeah, these apparently are not the Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire Suns who are just trading baskets with you.
No.
They're playing a little defense down in Phoenix nowadays.
Playing a little defense, and I'll say this. I mean, look, there's not a ton of star power on this Suns team. Look, Devin Booker, he's a star, and he is continuing to kind of rise up through the ranks here in the NBA. We know about Chris Paul, but Chris Paul, he's 36 years old. I mean, Chris Paul, as good as he is still, he's not the Chris Paul from 2008 running around out there. But they play such a good team game that everybody knows what their role is. They've accepted it. They can rebound the ball with Ayton on the inside there. They've just got really everything that you want from a depth perspective, and just the way they run their offense, it's hard to stop. And when Devin Booker is shooting the lights out from 3 like he was last night, when you go 7 of 12 and you're over 50% from 3, they're going to be tough to beat. And that's what it's been so far in the NBA Finals. So we'll see whether or not Milwaukee can make this a series. Coming up, you can listen to it on Sunday night on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Game 3 coming up between the Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks from Fiserv Forum on Sunday night. The MLB Draft coming up on Sunday as well. And David Beauclair, you threw out quite the shot earlier. You think Rocker and Leiter go 1-2 in the draft. Now, they're both right around the top 5 in the projections, but I'm kind of with you. Like,
I've seen Rocker as low as 7.
I have too, and I'm with you. Like, I watched those 2 guys pitch, and I just don't know how you could pass on those guys. They're awesome. So I'm interested to see how much of the projections are accurate and how much teams maybe don't overthink themselves and say, you know what, the name of the game is pitching in today's game, and you got to get some guys in here that can do it at a high level and do it quickly. I think Leiter and Rocker are both guys that can rise through the ranks relatively quickly and be in the MLB in the not-too-distant future.
But and that's the thing. Baseball is the most patient of the major pro sports when it comes to prospects. But that patience has decreased significantly in recent years too. And when you're looking at guys who can be on a major league roster and contributing something, I mean, Leiter and Rocker could both be on a major league roster at some point, probably before the end of 2022, and by most people's accounts, they were 1-2 at the start of the season. Neither guy pitched poorly. When you talk about 1-2 in strikeouts in the NCAA, all that, getting a team that had flaws to the College World Series final, or I wouldn't say flaws, but had it wasn't as consistent as they probably wanted to be.
Sure.
It's I just think it was too easy for everybody to spend the whole season looking at other prospects and who could be a top prospect, and it's sort of taken. Those two guys have sort of been taken for granted a little bit. But when the time comes, I expect those names to be called very, very early.
So let's go around the room, because I think you can be in pretty good shape with both players, but I do think there are different styles of pitchers. Like, both of them have good stuff. Don't get me wrong, but
Right.
I think Leiter has better stuff than Rocker does. So who would you rather have as your future ace? Would it be Jack Leiter or would it be Kumar Rocker? Ryan Porth, we start with you.
I think I trust Leiter more at the major league level to be an ace.
Okay.
Like
just because of the stuff that he's got?
Yeah.
Because Rocker's a big game guy. Now
He is.
I realize the last time we saw Rocker, it didn't go particularly well for him. Now, he was on 4 days rest at that point, too. But we've seen Rocker throughout his entire career at Vanderbilt. When the moment gets big, that's the guy you've wanted on the mound.
Yeah. I mean, Leiter in, what was it, the Thursday or Friday night game against NC State where
he lost 1-0.
And Highfield
whatever
was
game
on that mind.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But he faced adversity in that game and was just a bulldog and got guys out with ducks on the pond. And that to me was a Major League Baseball type of situation where you need your ace to get you out of a situation like that. So I think I trust Leiter more. Plus, in just the grand scheme of things, I could see a situation where Rocker becomes a closer. Like we see it all the time where starters, they convert them into bullpen guys because they're just better suited for that. Not saying that Rocker's not suited to be a starter, but I could see that within the spectrum of things with him.
David Beauclair, who would you rather have as your future ace? Jack Leiter, Kumar Rocker?
Again, understanding it, you're splitting hairs here,
Yes.
but I would pick Rocker just because he's different. You know, that size and projecting what that size could mean in terms of increased power and velocity and I just like the way he walks about out there and has a presence on the mound. So I think as great as Leiter is, he's great in ways that other guys are great. I think Rocker's a little something different, so I would go with him.
This is tough for me because I love both. I think at the end of the day, though, I'm probably giving the slight edge to Leiter, just based on the stuff. That's it. Because I think his fastball's got a little bit more life, and his breaking ball, it's coming along pretty nicely. And as we learned throughout the end of the season, he's now working on a changeup as well to add to the repertoire. So maybe some more pitches coming for Jack Leiter as well. I think it's very difficult to choose. Splitting hairs. Heidi from Dixon says Rocker because he's got a cooler name for marketing. So there you go on that front as well. Philip says very tough to choose, but at the end of the day, you take Leiter and his stuff, especially in this day and age. So probably going to be a pretty good day.
Both of them have the athletic pedigree.
Oh, yeah.
You know, which you like. I know, you know, a lot of scouts and GMs look at that sort of thing. It's either way, big weekend for Vanderbilt baseball.
Absolutely. So good luck to both Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker coming up this weekend in the MLB draft. David, thanks for taking time to join us today. You'll be back on Monday as well, so looking forward to that.
Sure, why not? I'll be able to make up this sleep over the weekend.
That's right. We're going to continue to talk a whole lot of sports coming up on Monday morning with David Beauclair in the fold. That does it for us today. Darren Dodick and Chase is coming up next. You're listening to ESPN 102.5 The Game.